Welcome to town meeting after a brief adjournment of a couple of years. We'll start in the traditional manner, and I will invite the scouts to come forward for the presentation of the flags, recitation of, excuse me, the Pledge of Allegiance, and they will also recite the Scouts' oath. Will you come forward, please?
Color guard, attention. Color guard, advance. Color guard, halt. Present the colors. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing as we recite the Scout Law. A Scout is trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. Thank you. Color guard, retreat. Color guard, dismissed.
And be seated. And now I'm going to repeat the question I pressed a little earlier. Am I audible at the back of the hall? Yes. Good. Thank you. I'd like to welcome you all to what I believe is the 231st Johnson meeting. The first meetings were pretty informal, generally a couple of people sitting in a tavern somewhere, wondering what they were going to do with the 45 square mile tract of land they'd just been awarded by some monarch somewhere. We meet today in that tradition, and before we're done, I guess we're going to decide what we're going to do with that same 45 acres 230 some odd years later. I have to start by talking about the rules of town meeting, so we're all on the same page with that. First, people who are registered voters may sit in this area, and I would prefer, I cannot require, registered voters to be seated here rather than standing in the back of the hall. Non-voters who are not on the checklist and not at the present time registered to vote, I would request to sit. They didn't give you a place to sit this year. Are there any non-registered voters here? Have. Okay. Good. Well, then I guess we don't have an issue with where folks will sit. All speakers are required to come to this microphone to speak. These microphones will be recorded, and they are the official record of what happens here today. The microphone does not know who you are, even though I may know who you are. So you have to identify yourself anytime you come to the microphone to speak, so that the record accurately reflects who was saying what, when, and where. a regular admonition campaigning for anyone on the ballot is not permitted in here. It is permitted outside the building, but by state law, campaigning at this meeting is prohibited. Then we come to Robert's Rules. Roughly 600 pages of extremely dense prose, most of which has absolutely nothing to do with what we're going to be doing here today. But the following items are in Robert's Rules, and they are, by statute, the rules that regulate how we perform this town meeting. The first thing I'm required to do, and I will do it a little bit later, is to read the warning to you. It's boring, it's tedious. I've always hated to read aloud in front of people ever since I was in second grade, but I will do that because the rule requires it. We'll take the articles in numerical order as they appear, and we would ask you to, if you're going to speak, to address the item on the warning that we're talking about, that we've announced as being, and that a motion has been made to bring to the floor. If you want to talk about other things, other business is the last item, and that's where that commentary belongs. On every article or warned issue, we have to start by having a motion. So someone has to stand up and make a motion that we do X. Robert's Rules does not allow a negative motion in the sense that a motion not to do something I cannot recognize. It has to be affirmative in its presentation. That motion has to be seconded by someone, and after the motion is made and it's been seconded, we then proceed to discussion, which is one person at a time. I will endeavor to recognize anyone who wants to speak. I would prefer that we could keep our comments relatively short. A half-hour disquisition on what we think about the budget won't be either helpful, nor will it keep the rest of the people awake. Ask you to please direct your comments to the motion that's on the floor and not on other matters. It is possible that someone may wish to amend the main motion. That's provided for in the rules. You may rise and say that you wish to amend the motion in such and such a way to change a number, change a date, change some part of the original motion. That motion will be in order. There has to be a second, and then there will be a discussion of the amendment. Under Robert's Rules, it's permissible for someone to rise and propose an amendment to the amendment. This is when we begin to get into sleepy time, because we have to be very careful that if we're talking about an amendment to the amendment, that's all we talk about in that discussion. We don't talk about the main motion, we don't talk about the amendment, the first amendment. We will then vote in reverse order. We will vote first on the amendment to the amendment, then on the amendment, and then on the original motion. This may seem a bit arcane at this point, but it should play out if we get to that point. My preference would be that we only deal with one amendment, but the rules do allow for the second. After the discussion is concluded, and it's concluded either because folks are simply tired of talking about it, or it can end by someone making a motion to call the question. That has to be seconded, and if you get a 2/3 majority voting for that, discussion ends, and you proceed to vote on the main motion. If you're kind of lost in this recitation, you're not alone. There are many others who are equally confused, and I will try to explain how we're proceeding as we go along. If you are confused, pick up your hand, put up your hand, say you're confused, and we'll try to straighten it out. All of that being said, we will then proceed to the reading of the warning.
Which is on page 13 of the town report, if anyone would like to.
If you want to follow along and see how well I'm reading, go to page 13 and you can give me a grade after. Warning, annual town meeting for the town of Johnson, Vermont, March 7th, 2023. The legal voters of the town of Johnson, Vermont are hereby notified and warned to meet in the town in-town meeting at the gymnasium of the Johnson Elementary School in said Johnson on Tuesday, March 7th, 2023 at 9 o'clock in the forenoon, local time, to transact the following articles of business. I'll note that we have convened. It's now 9:25. I'll also declare the polls are open. And proceed on to Article 1. Shall the voters elect the following town officers? Elect a moderator for town meeting, elect town clerk, elect town select board officer for a 2-year term, elect town select board officer for a 3-year term, elect a town treasurer, elect a grand juror, elect an agent to prosecute and defend suits, elect an auditor, elect the town tax collector, elect plot cemetery agent, elect Whiting Hill Cemetery agent, elect trustee of public money, elect library trustee, and elect Lamoille Regional Solid Waste Management District Supervisor. Article 2, to elect 2 Lamoille North Modified Unified Union School District Board of Directors for a 3-year term, or terms, I guess. Notice is hereby given that ballot boxes for reception of the ballots of the election, town and Lamoille North Unified Union School District officers, Articles 1 through 2, opened at 9 o'clock a.m. when town meeting opens and shall close at 7 p.m. in the evening. In annual town meeting, starting with Article 3, to review the reports of town officers and others as included in the town annual report. Article 4, to establish the rates of compensation for town officers. Article 5, shall the voters authorize total fund expenditures for operating expenses of $3,341,120.22, of which an estimated $2,084,868.79 shall be raised by taxes, and an estimated $1,256,251.43 by non-tax revenues. Article 6, shall the voters authorize the town of Johnson to raise, appropriate, and expend up to $50,000 for the purpose of hiring or contracting with an economic development professional. Article 7, shall the voters authorize the town of Johnson to collect property taxes to the town treasurer in 4 equal installments pursuant to 32 Vermont statutes annotated, Section 4792, as listed below, with delinquent taxes and assessments have been charged against them an 8% commission after the 4th installment, citing 32 VSA Section 1674, and interest charges of 1% per month or fraction thereof for the first 3 months, thereafter 1 and 1.5%, excuse me, well, yes, 1 and 1.5% per month or fraction thereof from the due date of such tax. Such interest shall be imposed on a fraction of a month as if it were an entire month per 32 VSA Section 5136. Payments are due in the hands of the treasurer by 4 p.m. on the below due dates. First installment to be paid on or before August 10, 2023. Second installment to be paid on or before Monday, November 13th, 2023. Third installment to be paid on or before February 12th, 2024. Fourth installment to be paid on or before Friday, May 10th, 2024. That concludes Article 7. Article 8, shall the voters authorize the town of Johnson to establish a grant match reserve fund for matching grant opportunities in accordance with 24 VSA Section 2804 to be funded annually by a dedicated line item, donations, bequests, and/or end-of-year surplus. Article 9, shall the voters authorize the town of Johnson to establish an Arboretum Reserve Fund for the preservation, development, and health of the Johnson Arboretum in accordance with 24 VSA Section 2804 to be funded annually by donations or bequests dedicated to the Arboretum, and/or unspent funds budgeted to the town of Johnson Tree Board. Article 10, to transact such other business as may be properly brought before this town meeting dated at Johnson the 30th of January 2023 and signed by all members of the board, the select board. Done. Then proceed to Article 3, which is to review the reports of town officers and others as included in the town annual report. And I would like to start that article by recognizing a man who will recognize this year the woman to whom this year's report is dedicated, and that's to my friend Eric Osgood. He's given 27 years of service to the town and the village. His reward for doing that is to move from this chair to that chair. Today, notwithstanding the fact that he has made that one chair move, he will be answering some of the questions you may have with regard to the budget and other matters in the morning. And he will answer those questions truthfully and completely to the extent that he knows the answer. If he doesn't know the answer, he will ask Rosemary. And he will then repeat that to you. Eric's leadership in all matters, and particularly with regard to his handling of the COVID situation, really set a statewide standard for government transparency. And I would request a round of applause for Eric and his service.
I just wanted to personally thank Eric for the 24 years that we've worked together. I don't know if I could have done it without him. Thank you.
Okay. Reviewing reports of the town officers and others included. Does anyone wish to speak?
This year's town report is dedicated to Linda Jones. Linda, I'm just going to read the first paragraph of the town report. Linda Sinclair Jones has been and continues to be committed, hardworking, extremely knowledgeable volunteer in the Johnson community. Her deep-rooted life experiences come from having spent her younger years on the family farm on Sinclair Road before moving to the village during her teen years. She graduated from Johnson High School and Champlain College and has spent the majority of her adult life in Johnson. Linda was a cheerleader in high school, rooting for the team. She continues to enthusiastically root for and promote Johnson's past and present and educate us about many aspects of our town. I won't continue reading, Linda, but thank you for all you've done for Johnson. If you don't mind, I'd like to give you a copy of the town report.
No. I just want to thank everybody. Totally surprised. I had absolutely no idea. But over the past week, I've been thinking back 20 years to the summer of 2002. And I remember a conversation that Eric and I had that day, one of the days. And we were talking about town things and we used to visit now and then. And I said to him that day, how come Johnson doesn't have a historical society? And he goes, why don't you start one? And I said, sure. So anyways, we went about our business. And I don't really remember how many weeks, but there were a few weeks went by. Eric stopped by. And he said that the select board town had created a position for town historian. Was I interested? And I said, well, I think I have to think about that a little bit. And he said, well, if you're interested, come to the next select board meeting. And we're going to have a post out about it. And so I thought about it and thought, well, sure. I love town history. I'll go. So Eric, thank you. Thank you for believing in me, I guess. And here we are. So fast forward another 4 years to 2006, and there was a small core of people that worked hard to create a historical society. And November of 2006, it became official. And I guess as the old saying goes, the rest is history. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Is there any further reviewing that anyone on the board wishes to make? Seeing none.
I just have a question. I noticed in the reports there wasn't any update on the merger between town and village. Is that relevant to ask that question now?
Yes.
There wasn't a report about the merger. Right now, the town is waiting for a joint meeting with the village trustees to discuss a quote for a merger plan that we have. But as of right now, we're kind of waiting to get together. There has been some meetings about discussions with the merger. But that's it. Is that more? Or does that answer your question?
Is that pre-report available for folks to see?
It's certainly public knowledge. There's the original study that's public, and we had a merger subcommittee with 2 members from each the village trustee and the select board. And they did a small report, which those meetings are public. Anybody in the town office could send them to you, or if you want to give me your email, I could send them to you. Okay.
Any further questions, comments on the town reports? Seeing none, we'll move on to the main event. Well, the beginning of the main event, anyway. Article 4, to establish rates of compensation for the town officers. We will require a motion on this one. Yes.
Mike Dunham, I move that the chair receive $2,000 and the rank and file members receive $1,500.
Is there a second? There is a second. Discussion. Silence being thunderous. Proceed to a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Oh. Okay, all right. I'll take that back. I'm sorry.
No. John Gregg, how many town meetings have you moderated?
I believe this is 42.
Okay. For those of you who are not aware of it, David and Peggy spend the winter in British Columbia, is that right? Which means he flies back from British Columbia to be the town moderator. He flies back at his own expense. And he said, I asked him, he said there's been various discussions over the years. I don't know if I could propose a motion or something that maybe, I don't think it's going to work for the town to pay all his fees, but how about a 50-50 split in honor of 42 years of being our moderator?
Second. Not to exceed $500.
He said it does cost about $1,000.
I am going to step away from the microphone, since it would appear that I might have a material interest in this. So I'm going to leave now.
Okay, so is that a proposed amendment to the original motion?
Yes, Madam Chairman.
Do you accept that proposal? Okay, so the motion is now that the town pays up to $500 of expense for David to come and moderate town meeting for the next year. Any further discussion or amendments? Yes? If you could please state your name and your comment.
Charles Flom. I run a couple of small businesses. The town's a small business. His expenses should be paid in full. It's a business.
Is that a request for an amendment?
It's an amendment that his expenses should be paid in full.
Is that an accepted amendment?
Absolutely.
Okay. So we now have a revised motion, which is the town pays David's expenses in full for transportation to facilitate our town meeting.
I'm Kim Dunkley, and I probably don't have anyways, we're on fixed income. Our taxes, this wasn't included in our taxes. There are other people who may want to moderate that live in town, and I'm just speaking for those who can't continue to see taxes go up.
Thank you, Kim. Eric?
Eric News. I'm just wondering if we could have an estimate, Dave, on what your full expenses might be before we vote for this pig in the poke.
I think that this has all been very kind of you folks to consider this motion. My knowledge of this proposal arose about 15 minutes ago. And I haven't, up to this point, I really hadn't had an opportunity to mull it over. I would request that the motion be withdrawn.
So the motion has been withdrawn.
I withdraw my second.
Please. Can you go to the,
Since we're talking about rounds of applause for service, I think David's service is longer than anybody else's. So how about a round of applause for David?
that was worth $1,000 right there. So thank you. All right. Is there further discussion on Article 4? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, which was to pay the chair of the select board $2,000 and $1,500 to the other members. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, no.
I would like to recuse myself.
Okay. Article 5. Shall the voters authorize total fund expenditures for operating expenditures of $3,341,120.22, of which an estimated $2,084,000, let me do that again, $2,084,868.79 be raised by taxes, and an estimated $1,256,251.43 by non-tax revenues. There is a motion to authorize the expenditures I just stated. Is there a second? Second. There's a second.
Cause problems. I just want to walk through the budget a little bit as part of the discussion on this motion. So I'm going to not follow along in the book, just so you know. Maybe if somebody on the board could keep me honest with page numbers, that would be lovely. I do want to just talk through some of the higher differences. So I'm going to go line by line, and I'm going to start with the pilot payment in the budget. What page are you on, Duncan? On page 19. So there's a difference of $30,000 between last year's budgeted amount and this year's budgeted amount. This is revenue, by the way, from the state. And we believe that the revenue from the state will be less than it was last year. So we wanted to budget accordingly for revenue to account for that. So that's one line I'd like to identify. Closely after that, the state grants highway. We have a proposed budget of $27,000. In the prior year, we had $34,800. We are submitting grant applications We wanted to be a little bit more conservative in the way we budget, based on what we think will be awarded for grants. We don't want to make assumptions on revenue that is unlikely to come in, so we made adjustments to account for that. Jumping down to Highway Reserve restricted funds. There is a bump up in the amount that we are looking to pay into our restricted funds for the highway budget. Reason being is over a period of 10 years, 11 years actually, I think is what we have our budget laid out for. 42. The thing is that my line numbers shift a little bit, so you'll have to help me with line numbers, but line 42. Anyway, sorry. We need to add a little bit more money into our capital reserve fund so that we are properly accounting for and spreading payment for equipment for the town highway over those years, so that we don't end up having to take money or significant amounts of money out of our operating budget, in 5 to 6 years. So we increased the amount we're contributing to that reserve fund so that we can be a little bit more strategic in the way we save the money and account for the known expenses that we'll have in the future. Also, along those same lines, on line 46, the reserve buildings and capital restricted, we increased the amount to that line as well because we know that there's town buildings that need maintenance and repair. And honestly, this won't cover all the maintenance and repair that will be needed over the next few years. But again, strategically, we want to put ourselves in a good position so that we're not hurting ourselves in our operating budget in a few years' time. On the bridge reserve fund, which is line 49, we have reduced the amount on that line by $20,000. We've done a lot of bridge work. We have received some FEMA funds to help with bridge work, and we don't think we need to continue to fund that particular account as highly as we had in the past. And for the Holcomb rental income, we have done a lot of calculations and discussions with Historical Society and made accommodations for that as well. And that's row 50. Just going to scoot down a little bit. Let me see where we are. Let's talk about skate park grants. So it is either row 98 or within 2 lines of row 98. It's called grants. And there is a $2,300 difference, and this is feeling pretty confident about receiving grant funds for skate park use. Tuesday Night Live section, which is starting on row 114. In the sponsorship line, we made some accommodations for what we've seen historically over time and bumped that up a bit for revenue, which leads to ultimately a total revenue difference of 2.4%. Are there any questions on revenue? Okay. Seeing none, switching over to expenses, general government expenses, and everything that falls under general government. There was an increase for office admin salaries. Oops, sorry, jumping around a little bit. The difference is $12,835. That accounts for a number of things. It accounts for having a 5th road crew member that we were able to hire finally. So many thanks to our road crew, by the way. They've put in a lot of hours over the year and 2 years' time. Thank you. Other increases are to be expected around healthcare, around insurance, and I guess the next line is insurances, which increase also along with salaries, line 145, or thereabout. It's an increase of $6,167. Another line item, which is line 153, is a reappraisal fund. 151 for you. Okay, from now on, I'll be ahead of you 2 lines. So line 151, that we need to put some additional money into reappraisals. We know that with the changes in housing prices over the past few years, we'll have to make adjustments. By state statute, we're going to be required to make adjustments. And we don't have listers like we used to, so our appraisal services, this is accounting for that. And the select board just actually, the past couple of months, have been working on a joint contract with Hyde Park, which I'm now authorized to sign, where we'll share assessor services to help minimize the spend for Johnson. Alongside that is listers contracted services. There's a $10,000 increase there as well. We're assuming 8 hours per week for those services, so that is alongside the other assessor services. Same idea. We need to make sure that we have folks accounted for. The reappraisal fund is more about big spend. The lister services is more about operational day-to-day, and we'll need to increase that as well. That is 161. I'm just going to pause there because I want to make sure that I'm explaining this properly, and I feel like I'm not. Am I misexplaining this line? The reappraisal fund versus listers? Yep. I am. Yeah. You are correct. I'm correct? Okay, thank you. Just want to make sure. Okay. 159. Yeah. Is there a question on that? Just where it was. I got it. Okay, perfect. I'll jump also to line 169, which is the Trailhead Building Grant. You'll see a big shift there. That was money in, money out for the most part. And we just won't have money to spend in fiscal year 24. So that's the reason for that shift. Interest on loan payments, which is 178. That is increasing, and it's increasing because anytime we buy new equipment or new anything, interest will be higher. The interest payment will be higher. It evens out in terms of total payments, but we need to account for that interest payment here. And we do pull some of this funding, if it's capital equipment, from reserve funds. We just have to show that it's expended here. Oops. That is not. Scooting down, looking at my notes as I scoot down through. If there's anything that's popping out as I'm talking about things and I skipped over, please stop me. We can backtrack. Okay, let's look at line 233, which is building capital expense. There is a 50% change for 2024. It's adding $15,000. This is for heating upgrades for the garage and the lower storage building, slightly different than the prior property discussion, property maintenance discussion a few minutes ago. We need to do something about heating in that building, so this is accounting for that. Line 235, Holcomb House Building Maintenance and Repair. There's a request from Historical Society for roof and porch repairs. There's been prior water damage and some other issues that need to be addressed, so that's what that is taking care of. Line 237, which is Light Industrial Park, our loan payments completed in April, so we no longer have that expense in our operating budget. Law enforcement, line 245. Law enforcement has a 5% increase for fiscal year '24, resulting in $25,555. And that's mostly made up of salary and benefits. Library services has a online 250. Library salaries has an increase of $6,570. Self-explanatory if it's salary. Just skip down through. Line 306 under skate park and bike track section. That has a total decrease of 80%, so $3,200 in planned expenditures for personnel. There's also an increase in that same section on line 312 and also on line 315. The 312 is about capital site improvements. There's some talk about half pipe, maybe? Sorry, I'm not a skater, as you can imagine. Anyway, there's some talk about some improvements to some of the offerings down at the skate park. And then an increase in public outreach. That's not a big amount. Let's skip to the highway section. So line 342. Highway salaries, apologies, the salaries on the general section at the beginning. Let me tell you what line am I on? 45. At the beginning, where we talked about salaries and benefits for general government and the increase of $12,835 on line 131-ish, that is office staff increases, not highway. Highway staff is in the highway budget. And highway salaries and benefits, you'll see that $27,670 difference on row 345 to account for salary increases, so regular annual increases, as well as accounting for the fifth employee. And insurance has a similar, insurance actually has a reduction accounted for based on a number of factors. But I think it's mostly about who has selected insurance at this point in our staff. Summer roads, so summer roads on 369, we have a difference of $5,000. It is a increase from prior, and it's to account for the additional cost of materials primarily. The same is true of dust control on 2 lines down, so 369. And then for capital and construction projects on line 372, we have a reduction in the cost on that particular item. We do have some grants that are expected around better roads. And what is GIA? Grants in aid, so it's a federal or a state program?
State program through DEC.
Okay, state program through DEC. Yes, Eric?
Eric Noose, I have a question on the summer roads for the brush and tree removal. Is the select board been looking forward to the emerald ash borer problem we're going to have? It's looming. I know it's not here yet, but I know the estimates for taking care of dead ash trees along the right-of-ways is quite high. Has there been any planning on that into the future?
Yeah, we have, the road crew actually has a general directive to remove any ash trees along the town right-of-way as they're doing other work on roads, so as they identify things and have time, and they're continuously doing that.
I'd like to allow Beth to complete her presentation. Then I'm going to interrupt the proceeding because our legislators have just entered the hall, and I would like to give them an opportunity to speak, and then we'll get to questions on the budget if you'll be so kind. Thank you.
So, sorry, I wasn't listening to you. Are they going to take the floor now?
No.
Okay,
Well, maybe
it looks like they are. They can.
There he is. Says he was in the
You can go ahead and take the floor.
Want me to start? Okay. Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Okay, here I am. Good morning. Thank you for allowing me to speak this morning. It's great to see everybody after been a while, but we were just up in Wolcott and they had a pretty decent turnout as well, so good to see everybody. So I'm Dan Noyes, represent Wolcott, Hyde Park, Johnson, and Belvedere. And I serve on the Human Services Committee. And so I thought I'd start just giving an update on the other representative. Kate Donnelly has resigned, and the governor has two names and has interviewed two individuals who would like to finish her term, Randy Pratt from Wolcott and Melanie Carpenter. So he said he would make a decision sometime after town meeting. So we'll be back to having two reps for this legislative district. So put my glasses on here. I got some notes. So as I said, I serve on the Human Services Committee, and one of the bills that we've been working on this session is an upgrade or an update of adult protective services. This hasn't been really looked at for a couple of decades, and it really needed some updates because years ago, a lot of older Vermonters would receive care in nursing homes, and now it's more trending towards people receiving in-home care for home and community-based providers. So we really needed to look at these, how they deal with individuals who abuse vulnerable adults, and whether they're older Vermonters or individuals with developmental disabilities in their communities and in their homes. So this is about a 60-page bill, and will be on the floor next week. It's one that I've been working on quite a bit this session. Another bill that passed that I've been working on, and we just hired, or the governor just appointed, the Office of the Child Advocate. So this was a position that works with youth in the custody of the state and helps make sure that they have the supports to transition to adulthood successfully. It's a bill that's took a while to get to where it is. Matthew Bernstein is his name. He just started. He will a week ago. So looking forward to really seeing him put together kind of his support services around an advisory committee coming up in the next couple of weeks. Another bill that I've been working on this session with Representative Harrison is looking at how we tax Social Security, and this has come up quite a bit, and we increased the deduction for the tax on Social Security last year. but inflation kind of took care of that. So we're looking to boost it up again, around 8%, but then tie it to inflation so that we don't have to keep going back and changing this exemption. One of the things we really have been hearing a lot about, and I'm sure you'll hear a lot from Senator Westman as well, is around workforce. And one of the workforce issues that we've been talking a lot about in the Human Services Committee is around nursing homes and residential care facilities and having the ability to pay people wages so that they'll want to work in these fields to take care of people. We had a rate study come back looking at adult days, and it's pretty expensive to really bring these agencies up to a level where they can make ends meet. So we're going to try to figure out a way over long term to kind of get those agencies back up and not having the workforce shortages that they're having and not having staff. So I'll leave it at that and take some questions, but I'm going to let Senator Westman go.
So I'm Rich Westman, and I represent the whole county. I do have to say, it's going to be strange coming here. I've been senator since 2010, but it's going to be strange coming here without Eric calling me ahead of time and telling me what I should be doing. I think the town's been lucky to have Eric. I thought I'd get enough time to eat my piece of pie, but I didn't. So I hope nobody touches my half a pie back there. So my morning committee, I moved from the Natural Resources Committee to Agriculture, and actually it was a pretty good move because there's a lot of things going on in agriculture and moving towards a new world in agriculture for around here. And my afternoon committee is appropriations, where all of the money goes through and you get a broad view of state government. And I think instead of talking about individual issues, the overarching issue that we see in everything in state government is the lack of workforce. And we hear it in the private sector in everything, but particularly in state government, it is everywhere. It colors every issue from childcare to the climate change issues to our prisons. You know, we're running a prison system now that all of the staff at the prisons are working 12-hour days, and some are working 60 and as much as 80 hours a week. And and we're starved to be able to get people to work across state government. And back up from that, just before COVID started, we now have 26,000 people less working than we did before COVID across the state. And just to give you a perspective, that's the population of this county. You know, we're a small county and we're only like a little over 3% of the population of the state, but 26,000 people is a lot of people. 9,000 of those were retired people that have retired from work. What the issues that creates for us is, for revenues going forward in state government, we've got 26,000 less people paying income taxes. So we're looking at revenues dropping. We're looking at the world changing. Yeah, she testified in front of my committee last week in agriculture, so it does get personal when you do that. But the overall piece is that lack of workforce. We've got studies out there, and we're going to have the issue of childcare. And we only now have placements in childcare for 45% of the kids that are born. And we need to open up more placements. We need to, educate the population that's taking care of the kids. But when you look at raising a lot of money for that, and you go, but who are we going to get to do the work? It is the issue of our time. It's where we are spending a lot more energy looking at than we have in the past, and it really is coming up to bite us. And I bring that up because it will affect us. Now it's how we get people to work, but in the next 2 to 3 years, the estimates from the state economists are that our revenues are going to drop significantly, and we're not continuing with the $2.5 billion from the federal government to prop up our budget as we had during COVID. So we've got a lot of issues around that, but that overarching issue of workforce is both at the in the private sector and in state government is present in everything we think about now, particularly in a money committee or a place that we do that. And I think the best thing is maybe open it up for questions from the crowd.
Alan Beard, and I have a question that I think probably a lot of people here would be interested in. If the overhaul of Route 15 contract has been let for Johnson to Jeff, anybody got any idea?
So they're supposed to pave I believe 9 miles between Johnson and Jeff. I think it's 9.6 or something like that this year is on the paving schedule.
But the question is, has the contract been let?
I do not know that, but I can find out.
I don't think it has.
You haven't put the contract out yet?
I don't think they've let the contract yet. But I don't think they've let the contract yet, but I'm not absolutely sure of that.
Okay, thank you.
It is on the schedule for this summer.
I hope it is.
Yeah, that and also Cambridge to Belvedere is also on.
I would just say that that's another one of those issues that the price of the bids that are going out are extremely high, and most of the contractors doing work for transportation are having real problems finding people working, and it's coming back in everything we do now. It's rolling through everything and making it harder for us to get this work done.
Charlie Gallanter, and I have a question, comment for both of you separately. Dan, so you want to increase the amount of wages excluded from Social Security taxation. Have you also looked at increasing the ramp? The ramp is $10,000. This is an income sensitivity issue. The ramp of $10,000 hasn't changed ever, and yet we have inflation, so shouldn't that ramp be longer? From, I think my calculation was it should be $15,000 at your proposed rates. Where are we on that?
Yeah, so the bill that I put in with Representative Harrison does not address that, but does an additional 8% for both single and married, and then says going forward it would be tied to inflation. But you raise a good point.
The ramp's unchanged.
Correct, in the bill that we put in.
It should be increased by 8%.
Yes.
Thank you.
I agree.
You're not changing your bill then?
I'm not even sure if Ways and Means is going to take this bill up. We're trying, but
When's
they don't.
crossover?
Crossover is for the money bills will be a week after we get back. So
Which is when?
not this Friday, next Friday.
Thank you.
Yep. 20th.
20th. Richie, you're on appropriations and agriculture, and there's a workforce shortage. the state can't find enough employees, is that correct? Is that?
There's a shortage everywhere, and you know, across everything we do now.
So the Agency of Farm, what is it, Agriculture, Farm, Food, and Markets?
Yep.
It's got a long title.
Yep.
Which your Farm Committee would oversee?
Yeah.
And your appropriations would budget for?
Uh-huh.
Their staff has increased dramatically over the last several years, and maybe that's a place to look at. They got too many employees for too much money.
Well, the agency has 136 employees.
Yeah.
Out of 6,000 or 7,000 people working for state government, I think it's the smallest agency. You know, they part of the increase that came during COVID and came around all the food programs that are offered, and like farm to plate and all of those sorts of things. So it's not the first place that you're going to look to cut positions in state government because it's so small.
But that's where you are.
Well, you know, I spend my afternoon in appropriations, and that's where everything is. So.
Charles Flom, 100C. Has questions for Rich. One of the big issues is lack of rentals. Airbnbs have gone through the roof. My own son and daughter-in-law bailed on coming back to Vermont because rents are insane. Rents for a 2-bedroom over in Morrisville, right now, $1,800 for a 2-bedroom without utilities. What are you going to do about the proliferation of Airbnbs, which have taken rental properties off the market? I have a young man who does a little bit of part-time work for me and also is a J-Peak ski patroller. And he's been trying for 2 years to move out of the town and move to someplace else closer. And every time he looks finds a rental, you know, literally 2 hours later, it's gone. So unless we do something about more rental properties being available to young people and other people to move into the state, it just ain't going to happen. So what are you guys doing about that?
Well, if you take a look at what we've done to support VHCB and put money into building houses, a lot of the housing that you see in Morrisville, when you're downtown in Morrisville and you look at the big building downtown, a third of that money has come through VHCB and the support we've put in that. Over the last year and a half, we put $100 million in state dollars into that. So from a budgetary standpoint, we put a lot of money into that. We've also, I think you have to be careful about when you talk about and lump all Airbnbs into one place. And I'll be quite frank with you. I have 19 long-term apartments, and I have the farmhouse I grew up in, I put $600,000 into, and I opened it as an Airbnb, so I didn't lose the land that is the 500 acres that is my family farm in that. I make no apologies for that. The Airbnbs are the fastest growing revenue source within the state budget too. There's two sides to this. They all pay rooms and meals tax. At the same time, we need money in the budget to support housing. I will say it could be policed a lot more. I think I opened an Airbnb and I have a caretaker on site. I think there's a lot of things we can do around that. We do need to build more housing. And the cost of housing has been driven up dramatically during the pandemic. And that support that we've put in through the state budget with infrastructure money and with ARPA money is very important. In this budget adjustment, we just put another $40 million into VHCB to support housing. These are not easy issues, and they aren't just going to be quickly gone through. These are tough issues, and we're all working on it.
Could I follow that up? It came out recently that 27% of housing purchases within the state are from out-of-staters. A lot of that is investment property. Is there some way you can address that? Because what we don't need is a lot of out-of-staters purchasing property to turn over and do Airbnbs. I mean, you know, we got to do something. I understand that you're boosting your budget, but it doesn't sound like that budget is going to, you know, put a large dent in this problem.
Definitely housing is something we think about a lot down there around workforce, and also for, just having affordable housing in the communities. And I've heard talk about looking at how we do the rooms and meals tax around Airbnbs, and then having that have more investments in affordable housing. You know, one of the things we also, I'm interested in looking at is housing for older Vermonters in their communities, so that when they want to move out of their houses, you know, maybe up on French Hill or maybe up on East Hill and Wolcott, there's a place in the community that will allow them to keep their connections, their community connections. Right now, we have not put a lot of investment into housing for older Vermonters in our village centers where we have our fixed route transportation. And so a lot of individuals are less likely to move out of their homes if they don't have any place to go. So, you know, I think this is definitely, we've seen these prices and for housing just skyrocket during the pandemic because a lot of people moved here. And as you said, you have out-of-state companies buying up homes, especially in ski areas, and Airbnb-ing them because there's money to be made. You know, I think it will take a while for us to kind of build our way out of this. So,
my name's Bill Moore. So I just want to start by saying thank you to Dan, because I know you have a strong voice for us who are aging now, working towards retirement, trying to stay healthy so we're not a burden. And also, Rich, that you have that appropriations mind now with a business model mind sitting on agriculture. I think that's going to be helpful to all of us. So also, Rich, I wanted to thank you for your vote against S5 to slow that process down and make it more rational. I think we should all appreciate that. Unfortunately, I do have something hard to ask about, which is H89. H89 has created categories of legally protected healthcare services. Some of the bill is rational and understandable, but there are some additions to it that are quite disturbing and perplexing. And there was, H89 says that contraceptive, abortion, reproductive services are legally protected healthcare activities. So it's a new category of statute. And then it goes on to protect those engaging in them or seeking them from what are referred to as SLAPP lawsuits or nuisance lawsuits. It also adds in the services, including pharmaceutical and surgical services for gender transition, and it doesn't make any distinction for age. So it says all persons. Unfortunately, the underlying statutes also create a situation where that law is now going to prevent parents from being able to be involved in the consent for their 14-year-old to obtain actual pharmaceutical and transgender surgical services. Now, you sponsored that bill early. I'm not a lawyer, you're not a lawyer. It was a very complicated piece of legislation. There was a lot of complicated and expert testimony. Vermont Medical Society has a 265-page book just about the legal position for physicians and other clinical workers in the state of Vermont. And they have small sections on these types of laws. So I'm not spouting from some opposition's position paper. You supported a bill in the House, which is now coming your way, Rich, that will cut parents out of, by law, the decision and the interactions with their clinicians beyond just counseling, which is where it was before, to actually obtain surgical and pharmaceutical services for transgender placement, or what's referred to as correction. And I wanted to ask you, why did you sponsor that bill in the beginning? Why did you think that that was such a great idea? And now that you've seen some of the testimony, do you have any second thoughts? Do you have any reasons you can give us why you would cut parents out of that important decision-making process by law? That's what your vote did.
I don't believe it cuts the parents out. I believe healthcare decisions should be between a parent and their physician. I don't believe it cuts the parents out of the decision.
So what you're saying is you didn't understand the bill when you voted for it, because the testimony was very clear that it will create if there's just no access for a parent who opposes that, even if they're custodial, not living with the child. That was testimony of the people supporting the bill. That was testimony from people from the Vermont Medical Society. That was testimony from people who are involved in court cases across the nation. So if you voted for the bill and you don't know what it said, to me, that's even worse. I would look into it, please.
Thanks.
Thank these gentlemen for giving us a part of what I'm sure is a very busy day for them. Thank you very much. Now, if Beth can remember which line she was on, we'll be ready to go.
Break things here. Okay, let's see. We were on the summer roads section. I think we had just finished that, actually. So let's move on to winter roads. So winter roads is, I'm going to very specifically talk about winter sand, which is line 381. I'll just give folks a second to get there. As you can see from that line, we actually spent more than we budgeted in the past year. The cost of sand has risen pretty significantly, so we're accommodating that change by increasing by $10,000. Next is bridges and culverts. I have a note here on a local match for a covered bridge study. But we are reducing the budgeted amount to $15,000 simply based on need. I'm going to skip down to line 398, which is purchases, large capital equipment. When we make purchases, we just need to account for that revenue and expense from our capital spend. That's what this is about. So essentially, everything in capital spend with a note of capital on it will be a net zero. So just want to call that out very specifically. And that is all I want to talk about in terms of operating budget. Are there any questions on operating budget, please?
Susan Moore, a couple of questions. On page 18, line 41, under miscellaneous reimbursements, the budget was $4,050. The actual was $57,000. Could we have some idea of what the difference was there and why that was so much more?
Miscellaneous reimbursements, line 41 is the question.
Yeah, for the 4,000 budget, 57 was actual.
Gonna look to Rosemary or Brian for that. A lot of it was the trailhead building, so we were reimbursing for an area we didn't have another line for. This is revenue, by the way, we're in the revenue section. Okay. So we're talking about revenue in that we didn't have a place to put, and luckily we had money coming in from the family who sponsored the railhead building. I assume those are family funds, or are they other funds? They're family funds.
Okay, thank you. And under office expenses, I've just noticed every year, this is page 22, line item 206, there's always a 10,000 budget and a 10,000 actual. There should sort of be a differential, I would think. Usually your budget and actual are never the same, and this is always the same. And I noticed that it's now $30,000 to be proposed. I work in a small office, and we don't come close to spending $10,000 a year on equipment, so I'm just sort of curious, what is that for that's not covered under other purchase items?
Good.
Rosemary could probably speak to this a little bit better, but that small equipment purchase current year is actually how our building reserve fund is funded. That's
So it's put under office expenses, but it's actually for buildings?
It's used for office expenses, but money that's left over sometimes ends up in surplus and ends up going into that line as expense to get into a reserve fund. It's kind of a very weirdly named item for going into a reserve fund.
And now it's going from 10,000 to 30,000?
Well, that item specifically, part of that is work on the town garage heating system, and there is some work at multiple other buildings.
So would this not be better put under highway or equipment versus
buildings.
office expenses?
It's kind of confusing.
Buildings.
Because it's buildings, that's why we increased that.
Okay, thank you.
Highway is typically people, machinery.
So hopefully I can add a little bit more context to that question about why. So Eben was absolutely correct. The town voters quite a few years ago had voted for the establishment of the Buildings and Grounds funds to kind of stabilize our expenses on building maintenance. And at that vote, it was decided that the unspent money on office equipment should be how that reserve fund is funded and how we get money into that. So that's why it's always $10,000. It's going up to $30,000 for some specific purchases of large format printing and scanning, which we think will better enable us to serve folks that are doing real estate transactions that involve our resources, and town government will be able to digitize more records, provide those more easily to residents and attorneys and the folks that need to access our records. So I hope that answers your question.
Thanks, Brian.
Yep.
Does this have to do with the reports
Budget?
that are being, yes?
Yep.
Well, would you hold until we can complete the presentation?
Oh, I'm sorry, I
on-
thought she was.
On budget, and then we'll,
No problem.
Oh, I did ask for questions on operating budget. If you have, I did ask for questions on operating budget.
okay, come on.
So first a comment.
Identify yourself to the...
Bill Moore.
Thank you.
So I appreciate that you've put a little buffer in salaries in at least two categories. I saw you mention a little buffer. I would hope that it's enough. I think this workforce thing, especially within the professions and within the CDL categories, is going to get worse before it gets better, so watch very carefully. I think anyone who's worked in the State House understands, that there's not much they can do down there about this. Mm-hmm. So it's really an economics thing. So earlier you mentioned, here's a real small one, Class 4 road labor, line 347, it's a zero right across the board. And then you talked about Class 4 roads briefly a little bit under, I guess it was gravel, stone, and dust control about maintenance. And there isn't much there. What I was wondering was, I know we do have some quote-unquote trails in town, and I know that aside from the Bass Trail, that's a separate package on the rail trail. Is maintenance being done on those by any town employees through the general highway maintenance budget, or is it mostly being facilitated through state grants or through VASA, the ATVers? How is that all continuing to be maintained? And also, is there awareness of the emerald ash borer, especially on those Class 4 and trails that are not being monitored like the town highways are? So it's really two parts.
I gotcha. Okay. So first on the comment about salaries is the salary adjustments are based on the calculations that and increases that we know the cost of right now, given a 40-hour work week kind of thing. So that's the first thing. In terms of the cost of maintaining trails and the work that comes along with maintaining trails, and just to define the trails you're referring to, like you're referring to trails on town land, I assume, and
Class 4 roads that are not maintained, that are used by the public for recreation.
I gotcha. And yeah, okay, I gotcha. Okay. We typically have volunteer committees who take great pride in their work, and they do a great job in that, by the way. So typically those groups really account for much of the work. And if they have budgeting that they would request as part of that work, they'd present it to the board as part of our operating budget, and that would be accounted for.
Okay.
So typically our committees who do have funding have standard funding year to year, and if they need a bump up, they'll request it.
Doesn't really mean anything at all. It's really not.
Okay. Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I actually want to touch on your emerald ash borer. And Noel, I might call on you for this too. But like I said earlier, the roads crew is looking at it from a road perspective. I also know that, I'm going to say the wrong group. I think conservation? No, our tree board? Both are keeping an eye on things also, and every once in a while come to the board with updates and requests. So if you have specific questions about what that activity looks like, I would direct you to Noel Dodge, who is, raise your hand, Noel, right there in the audience. He's a great resource. Do you want to add anything, Noel?
Noel Dodge, tree warden. I'll just add real quickly, we have a ash inventory that was done a number of years ago that's available, I believe, on the town website. And it's coming, so we're all thinking about it and how to deal with it. A big shout out to Jason and the town road crew for proactively going after ash trees as they're working. So we're doing the best we can. We're going to have to deal with it as it comes. Class 4 roads, I don't think we really have any information on because they're not technically being maintained. So thanks.
Thanks, Noel.
Hi, I'm Michael Patch. I'm going to go to your winter sand, gravel, NATO's pit. I think Eric and Duncan help you with this one. We invested in that over the years. Was a great thing. Now I'm seeing these trucks go from Johnson to Eden, Johnson to wherever to get material. First of all, which I've asked before, why? Because if a truck can make 4 trips out of a little pit here in Johnson, why would we make 1 trip from Eden? So remember this, we got fuel, an operator, the wear and tear on the trucks, the liability that they're going to hit somebody, and everybody knows how that goes because town trucks hit them along. Why is this happening? What's the future of this? Are we done over there? And because I haven't seen anything about it, or are we looking for a new pit? What's happening? Because we're spending a lot of money in the sand, gravel, trucking, tires, labor to get sand other places. So these prices are up here. So does somebody address that part?
Yeah, I'm going to have Eben speak to it, please.
Oh, boy.
Eben Patch.
He's not mine.
We have had meetings on the pit. There's not an incredible amount of years left in there. We have contacted Bert Nato about possibly getting an extension, and some board members have asked around and done some research on possibly getting a pit somewhere else. Obviously, purchase of any property would have to go through the taxpayers. Specifically, when the truck drivers were going to Eden, or town employees, they wanted to go to Nato's. Nato's didn't have material, and they had the time. So there is weighing of some of that, which our Public Works foreman watches for. Plus, when they were purchasing the sand in Eden, it was, I'm not sure if Jason is here, something like $3 a ton less. So it did pay for some of the extra hours and wear and tear that it took to get that material here.
Next question, and I don't care who takes it, and then I'll quit. When we started the Historical Society, there was a program that came out, and yes, they do a wonderful job. Thank you, ladies, guys, that's nice. So we had that, there was an apartment building, it was over the top of that, was supposed to offset the cost of that property. So at one point in time, and I remember this very well because I went to it, and Eric was right beside of me, when this wasn't going to cost the taxpayers anything but a startling fund to get started. And Duncan, you were there too. So I see these increase in this stuff, and I'm not seeing any capital gain or where we're gaining any money from the apartments, and apartments are right out of this world now. So is there something I'm missing in the book where this doesn't show up, or I guess that's a question.
I'm going to let somebody who can speak more intelligently than I. Duncan, would you like this?
I may have you chip in, Eric, too. So, I don't remember what year it was, but there was a town vote which authorized the select board to purchase the Holcomb House on behalf of the behalf of the Historical Society. Part of that authorization was the town taking a 5-year note. And the discussion, as I remember it, was that the income from the rental of the 2 apartments would just about cover the cost of the loan payments. Am I getting this right, Eric? To your recollection?
You're there.
So that did, and also during that period of time, the Historical Society had been raising money, and someone from the Historical Society can chime in too, but the Historical Society had been raising money for the purchase of a building. So they contributed 50%, I believe, of the annual expense that the town was incurring for the loan for that 5-year period. So the loan has been paid off, and now we're in a situation where the income from those apartments is not needed to pay the loan costs. So and again, if somebody from the Historical Society wants to chime in, by all means, please do. But so the proposal right now, or the thing that the Historical Society is working on and the Select Board is considering, is abandoning the main apartment and allowing the Historical Society to expand upstairs into that space. So the rental income essentially would be from 1 unit on there. I would also just say, I was on the Historical Society, I got off when I got on the Select Board. If we were to re-rent that apartment upstairs, it would take a significant investment of money to make it rentable to the public. So, did I?
You did.
Oh, yeah, Beth is just reminding me. So the Historical Society has been right along paying what a contribution in lieu of rent, if you want. So that contribution in their budget is intended to pay for the costs of the utilities that they might be consuming. That has been increased in this year's budget as well. So.
And just one more thing. I think you guys have done a great job. You guys all get hammered on. I see all of it all the time. It's okay. But just remember, as the elderly, the people are getting older in town, and I look out across here right now, I would say probably 7 or 8 years, you'll probably won't see most of these people here. I know. No, because, no, stop, let me finish. Because I don't think we're gonna have town meetings. Everybody likes to do virtual, and not come to town meetings, what I was trying to say, because a lot of people won't be able to get out. As the town of Johnson goes forward in here, and you're very responsible in your budget, because I went through it and I hammer on it, I get it. And you're looking at the future, as you're coming into the future of Johnson in here, where do you see the Johnson helping the elderly, which he touched on some of it, but it wasn't in here. I'm talking about in your plans that you see, helping for the elderly as far as getting in and out of buildings, more facilitated, so they can access buildings, more like out and about facilities, as the select boards have input for that, like you've seen in Morrisville and supporting this stuff. Do you see a vision in time for this to come? And what you're thinking about that?
I'm not going to try to attempt to answer that, but I did want to say one thing about emerald ash borer, which is totally off subject. But Beth will do the other one. It's important to remember with the emerald ash borer and the town highway crew working within the town highway right of way, just remember that the trees themselves belong to the landowner, the property owner. So it's a cooperative effort between the town and the landowner to remove those trees. The only exception to that is if it's a danger tree that represents a danger to the traveling public, then the town has the legal right to remove a tree. But other than that, it's a cooperative affair.
You're probably not going to like my answer.
It's probably going to be fine.
Okay. I guess in my view, and this is just my view, not the board's view, but in my view, our job as part of as a town political entity is to make sure that we're keeping things safe in terms of what the town is responsible for. So it's important that we're keeping roads safe. If we ever get to a point where we merge with the village, whatever that new entity looks like, keeping sidewalks safe and the accessibility to those sidewalks and things like that, making sure we have accessibility within our town buildings as appropriate, wherever it's publicly accessible. Beyond that, I think as a town board, we have a responsibility to work with agencies and committees and other entities outside of our town government and help support those agencies so that they can provide the services that we can't provide.
You're fine. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Okay, I'm going to shift off regular operating budget really quickly. Let's look at page 29, which is the estimated cash on hand balances. I'm not going to read through all of these. I'm essentially just going to read out the bottom line. And the bottom line is actual cash on hand balance for fiscal year 21 was $64,062. And the estimated fiscal year 22-23 cash on hand balance is $213,393 with proposed reservations of $125,000 to reduce taxes, $16,057 for building ground maintenance fund, $40,143 for reappraisal fund, capital equipment fund of $12,043, and grant matching fund reservation of $12,043. And that particular line is contingent on a later article that we hopefully that we'll see come up in voting, for a total proposed reserve funding of $205,287. Sorry, $205,000, I said that right. Are there any questions on cash on hand? Cash on hand can be confusing, we get it. We're often confused when we talk about it. Okay. The following page lists the reserve fund balances. If there are any questions about reserve fund balances, please, now is the time. I'm not going to read them off. And we need to have enough cash on hand to pay our quarter one bills which will be the first quarter beginning July 1st of 2023. And those are the expected costs of those bills in the box, the second part of page 30. Page 31 talks about tax rate. I actually want to... and the tax rate percentage increase is rounds up to 3.5. I know it just says a flat 3. There's not a decimal point there, but it does round up to 3.5 if you were to, it's like 3.4, blah, blah, blah. So just to point that out. And then reserve funds. So page 32. This is our capital equipment budget. Some of the reserve funding that we talked about in terms of highway equipment and the like, they can be some pretty big numbers. This is our multi-year plan for budgeting and spending some of those budgeted amounts on heavy equipment primarily. As you can see that as you look through, the beginning balance at the beginning of each fiscal year shifts pretty significantly, and as we look at the 26-27 year and 28-29 year and a little bit further out, it goes down. It doesn't get below, I guess the lowest number is $11,474. This part of having cash available in reserves is so that we try to make sure we don't ever hit a zero amount in case something significant needs to be spent. And this is part of the reason for that increase in capital reserve funding that we talked about in the operational budget, increasing some of those numbers. Are there any questions about the capital equipment budget? If not, I think we've covered all budget-related items. I'm going to open it up just generally on whether or not there are any outstanding questions on the overall budget or cash on hand. Seeing none, we have an active motion on the floor, David.
All right, good. All right. So the motion before you is to authorize total fund expenditures for operating expenses of $3,341,120.22, of which an estimated $2,084,868.79 shall be raised by taxes, and an estimated $1,256,251.43 by non-tax revenues. All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. Ayes have it, the motion is carried. Article 6. Shall the voters authorize the town of Johnson to raise, appropriate, and expend up to $50,000 for the purpose of hiring or contracting with an economic development professional? Is there a motion with regard to that article?
Eric Noose, so moved.
Is there a second? There is a second. Thank you. Anyone want to speak to this?
Paul was your second. Paul? So the economic development, we worded this slightly different than past. I'm just going to acknowledge the fact that we did have this in the last town meeting as well. We worded this motion slightly differently because we believe that we need to put some more concerted effort on getting someone in, and we wanted to be more clear on the possibility of hiring someone if we get this money. We feel like all of the things that folks have questioned about the future, we have similar questions in our mind. And we also have the American ARPA funds, Rescue Plan Act money that's available to the town right now. We have the money. We have over $600,000 of money that we are looking to try and grow and cover some of the things that we've talked about today. We want to make sure that we're in a position in Johnson so that we are economically viable. We do things so that we can have a future, and we'd like to spend our money wisely in order to do that. We're hoping that getting someone into an economic development role in this capacity will help us do those things wisely and have a specific focus on economic development, as opposed to some of the things that happen operationally day to day from our town administrator. There's a lot on the town administrator side. It doesn't allow for us to really focus our energy on economic development the way we'd like. So, did I miss anything, board? No, seeing nothing, okay.
Kim Dunkley, quick question. How much of this job comes from the town administrator, village head, to be able to, you know, look into grants, all the things that this position would have, and how much does it take off their plates, and is that going to be reflected in their job titles and pay, or is this a whole new position?
I can't speak to village. This is new. What I can speak to village related is that village turned down an article last year in their village meeting. I don't know what they have, I don't know what they have on their village meeting plans for this year. So I can't speak to that side. What I can speak to is in terms of our administrator, town administrator, yes, our town administrator does do things related to grants. There is not sufficient time in the daily operations to do it justice. And we've not seen that we have enough of a focus on looking ahead because day-to-day is cumbersome. Yeah. Is there anything I should add? I guess I just want to make sure that I'm speaking for everybody when I'm speaking. Okay. Mike?
Yes, Michael Patch. Does Johnson still belong to Vermont Council of Development that's in Morrisville? Are we part of that?
The Lamoille County Economic Development, I assume you mean? Yeah. Well, yes, we work with them, yes.
So I guess I'm kind of confused. We're already funding through grants to the state that pays for this, and now we want our own because we're not happy with them? Is that what we're saying? We need somebody to focus because we've got a facility up there already that does this. We're already paying people as taxpayers already, and they're supposed to be working for us anyways. They're the ones that did the industrial park in North Hyde Park. They're the ones that did Cambridge's. Is there something I'm missing here why we'd have to have our own?
I guess I can't speak to what they've done for other towns, but what I can speak to is that we do use them to help us with some of the studies and things like that, but they don't have a significant amount of time that dedicated to Johnson. And we believe, particularly with ARPA funds where they are right now, we need to have somebody dedicated to help us invest wisely.
But not a full-time position for, no, it's going to be year to year as you need this.
It would be, the way this is worded is allows us to put it in our budget as a budgeted item for fiscal year 24. And yeah, we'd have to assess it each year.
Thank you.
Sorry, David.
I'm Diana Osborne. And my concern about this position is what you spoke to earlier with regards to how we're addressing the elderly. You spoke eloquently about how the Town Select Board has chosen their role carefully to be most appropriate as the political body for the town and do the things that helps the most people to stay safe. And you described your actions really precisely and concisely. And then now we hear that you want to expand that into this economic development thing. And I don't see that as something that is necessarily the town's job. And one reason I say that is because we don't even have the basic infrastructure here in place for the people who are here. You know, what are we doing developing a small industrial park or bringing in extra economic activity when we don't even have basic internet for people who live here, you know? And so I think we need to call this what it is. If it's a grant writer position, you know, to bring more money in, you know, that's different than an economic development position, because we're in no position to develop our economy. You know, we don't have places for people to live if they were to develop a new business and come to want to move here, you know?
I'm probably going to invite Paul in a minute, but I just want to address the grant writer comment. Yes, we need a grant writer. Yes, we need a grant administrator. Beyond that, if we're going to be strategic in how we move forward in terms of all things infrastructure that you're referring to, and you're talking about high speed very specifically, but there are other aspects of infrastructure, I think that we need to make sure that we have somebody who understands those aspects and can guide us through how we build out that infrastructure appropriately. And I think in the case of building out that infrastructure, it is appropriate as a town role to be involved in those infrastructure build-outs. And that can mean a whole bunch of things, right? That can mean internet, that can mean roads, that can mean access to water. It can mean a lot of different things. And I think we just need to be well-placed to be able to do those things, in addition to having somebody who can account for all things grant-related.
Mr. Gallenter, are you just stretching your legs, or? I was going to let you go in front of him.
Come on in. Age
He
before
yields.
beauty.
Go ahead.
Bill Moore, page 38, and I apologize if this isn't germane, I think it is. Page 38 has the American Rescue Plan funding, cash, I'll call it a cash reserve, it's probably not the right term, of $317,000 odd dollars. So is this position, what I hear you saying is, there's things that need to be done, and that as far as items like grant writing, they exceed the expertise and available staffing you have to pursue them. It's a leveraging idea. My recollection is with the ARPA funds that there's a deadline. They have to be dedicated or spent. And is it 25?
We need to dedicate at the end of by the end of 24 and
Right.
spend by the end of 26.
Is that part of this
This would be
idea?
this would be a significant portion. We need somebody to help us through spending ARPA, for sure, yes.
Right, but would the position would be funded as a general fund item in our budget, so these people would be at least in part, or maybe in large part, leveraging those monies?
In large part, yes.
Okay, so, good, thank you. It's
Charlie Gallenter. So last year we gave you $40,000 for economic development. And I believe you advertised for people you were looking to subcontract it. I'm assuming that the cost of subcontracting was higher than the $40,000, which begs the question, is $50,000 enough?
Great question. I was looking forward to your question, Charlie. The typical, I think this is fair to say, the typical response that we received was hourly. It was hourly costs. So it depends on how many hours we're going to contract with somebody is really the answer. And it depends on whether or not we're going to contract with a firm who is going to have multiple resources. And yeah, you're right, $40,000 isn't going to get you far, but it'll get you somewhere. So I don't know if I'm answering your question fully, Charlie, but it really depends on who's submitting an application and what that application says in terms of the structure in which we would be billed.
Eric Noose. I know with grants that quite often you can put in for administrative costs to the grant. Is that anything you can do with ARPA funds also? Is there a way to leverage if we vote for this money, to help offset that or to maybe raise that budget?
Yeah, so a whole bunch of wishful thinking. Let me tell you some of my wishful thinking. My wishful thinking is that we can spend money to make money, and what I mean by that is my wishful thinking is we can take this economic development money, get somebody in, even if they cost us a lot of money, and they can write grants to self-fund so that we don't have to spend ARPA funds on some of this work. I'd love to see us using some of our ARPA funds for grant matching, for example. So while $50,000 isn't going to pay for a full-time anyone who is highly qualified for this, hopefully it is enough money to get us in the door for somebody who can work towards self-funding as part of the economic development work and planning that that person will do.
Hello, Brian Van Dorn. First question, how would the extra $50,000 be paid for?
If this article is approved, it will go into our operating budget.
So paid for out of the budget?
Yep.
We just approved a tax, so would that actually raise then our budget?
Sorry, can you repeat what you just said?
We just approved the budget, so
Yes.
this would increase that budget
It would,
up
yes.
to 50 if that's what you spend?
Correct, yes.
Okay. Yeah, as a taxpayer, for my fellow taxpayers, I can't support any increase in the budget, but I would propose an amendment to this since it does seem to be important to a degree, and that amendment would be to strike raise. So it would state to appropriate and expend up to $50,000, add to that from the ARPA funds for the purpose of.
You have Eric was the motion maker and Paul was our seconder, so I think they would have to read it.
I know what it is, I just didn't know what the abbreviation was. Is there a second to the offered amendment? There is a second. Yep. Now, the original motion makers, would you consent to that amendment, or would you prefer to deal with the amendment separately?
Deal with it separately.
Okay.
So I welcome further discussion. I think I heard some comments behind me.
Okay.
Hey, everybody. Scott Meyer. I'm not really clear what the amendment was. We didn't really clearly hear it. Can somebody read it back so we have a full understanding?
That's my second request. The proposed amendment would cause the main motion to read, if approved, authorize the town of Johnson to raise, appropriate, and expend up to $50,000 from the ARA fund for the purpose of hiring or contracting with an economic development professional. Does that clarify it for you? Good.
I had struck raise.
Hang on just a second. Okay, now I've got a clarification on this. The motion to amend is to authorize the town of Johnson to appropriate and expend up to $50,000 from the ARA funds for the purpose of hiring or contracting with the economic development professional. Is that it? Okay, thank you. ARP. Okay. I missed a P. It's ARPA. Yes.
Bill Moore, is there a clear answer from anyone that funding can be expended that way? I'm not sure it can. I was only a little bit involved back in the time when that money was flowing through the State House, where I do some work, and my recollection is there may be a restriction that prevents us from spending that money that way.
Based on the acceptance, the way we accepted the money, many strings were removed, so we do have allowance to spend in this way.
Cool.
I just have a question about the pilot money. Is that really, you expecting that?
Identify yourself, please.
Oh, George Perlman. Yeah, the pilot money looks like between the pilot and current use, it's $500,000. With the college in financial trouble, is that going to really happen?
I'm going to be careful how I answer, is that really going to happen? But yeah, to the best of our knowledge, it will not shift significantly in terms of pilot money, at least not in fiscal year 24. We've not been told otherwise. And we actually had talked to our legislators about it, and it seemed like we were making a proper assumption.
Are we speaking to the amendment?
Yes. I'd like to ask the board, or what's your opinion on this amendment? I gather you didn't word it that way, that it would be paid for by ARPA money, looking for the town to pay for it, and then bring in more grant money to help pay for that position would be part of what you're doing. So I don't know. It seems like a good way out to pay for it with ARPA money and not add it to our budget, but will we do better if we do add it and bring in more? What's your opinion? I haven't studied this.
When you're getting done, you have certain liberties. You can say what you want, and nobody can go after you. As you can see, I'm fading so fast, I don't even have a name tag up here. A couple of things. The board did not have this discussion of whether we would fund this through ARPA money. That was not the thought or the discussion we had. It was intention that it be raised by taxes. I just wanted to maybe back up a few years. And years ago, we had a part-time position, town administrator, and a part-time economic development person. That person was Leah. She was very, very successful. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, what we paid her. However, during her tenure with working for the town, and I should say the whole community, because she was a joint position with the village, she was able to bring in about $15 million to this community, just this small community. Would some of that money have come anyways? Probably. Would we have gotten that much? Very doubtful. I mean, she was on top of things. She was out looking for grant opportunities. She was getting projects shelf ready, so when a grant became available, she got it out there, and we were very competitive because of all the background work that she had done. That's what this kind of a position can offer the town, is getting those projects ready to where they're... Maybe that's Leah, I'm not sure. Rest her soul. but, you know, if you have that person there, they can get the projects to the point where they're on the shelf and they're just waiting for the right opportunity. And yes, you know, we did allocate 50,000, not sure of what you would be able to pull somebody in at and actually have to pay them. But there are administrative costs that you can apply against any kind of grants to help cover the cost of that employee. So would it cost the town 50,000? Probably not. It'd probably be something much less than that because of whatever grants they're administrating, they would be get reimbursed for. I would not support this motion. ARPA is a one-time money. It is not going to come again. I've been up here 27 years. I've never seen money like that come in. It is a one-time deal. None of us will live long enough to see it again. Yes, it's a lot of money. It's about $660,000. But if you have the right person in here that can use that to pull down a bunch of more money for from other grants, you know, there's a very good chance that some amount, millions of dollars, could come into this community. So I can't overstress how important I think this position is, and I think it's more important than just a one-time deal. It should go into our payroll. It should be paid for out of taxes. It should be a permanent position because the benefit is going to get yielded for many years out forward. And so I would not support this motion. And I just would also mention, it was brought up on page 38. That's our revolving loan fund. That's a little bit different than the ARPA money. There are certain strings attached to this. It has to go out to a business that is going to either maintain jobs or increase jobs in the community. This is something that came out of the silver liners, you may want to call it, from our Sterling market, the Grand Union, when it flooded, when we were able to get the money, a significant grant to get that Sterling market in there. The way the grant worked was half of it came back to the town that we could use it for a revolving loan fund to help further business in the town, and that's what it is still, and it has to be used for that. So that's a little bit different than the ARPA money. But I just want to make sure I point that out.
Eric stole a little of my thunder, but I also think that this ARPA money is just a really incredibly unique opportunity for us to do some transformative spending. And I just don't think that spending it on one, you know, taking this 50,000 out of that money when we'll need it again, if this position is anywhere near as good as Leah was, we're going to want to continue to do that. And to just take this, I feel like it's a little sugar high. We'll take this $50,000 out of the ARPA money, but it'll be an ongoing expense. And like Eric said, I really hope we can bring on somebody that can use our ARPA money to pull down more money. I have never seen this kind of money flowing around the federal government and trickling down to the town of Johnson with no strings attached, basically. So I hope that we will defeat this amendment, raise the 50,000 out of taxes, know that it'll continue as a position that will pay for itself, very similar to what Leah did. I think it was $15 million that person brought in. So I hope that we will defeat this amendment, go ahead and support the original motion, which is to do 50,000 to bring a consultant or somebody that's an expert in this field so that we can take this 600,000 in ARPA money and leverage it for even more, because we have an opportunity for, I think, a couple more years as Bernie Sanders sits on head of the Senate Budget Committee. I mean, we've lost Pat Leahy, who brought a lot of money to Vermont, but Bernie is in a place right now where we're getting requests as your select board from Senator Welch and Senator Sanders. What do you need? And a lot of those requests say, if you need more money, we need you to have a 10% match or a 5% match. And that's why you'll say. And a plan. And a plan. Yes, yes. We need projects. But anyways, that's my feeling.
Casey Romero. A procedural reason to defeat the amendment is that decisions on the ARPA money don't have to be made until December 2024, as I understand it. There's a procedure in place for the Select Board to be making decisions. They've already got a lot of, information to work with and how to allocate it. If this amendment would essentially sort of jump the line, and procedurally, I believe that's a very poor idea.
Jeff Corey here. My feet went to sleep. I hope my mind hasn't. Listening to this conversation about the $50,000, this is to go out and get more money for us, grant money, that type of thing. What's the other position? Explain it to me what the other position or what this person is there for besides getting money. Is he also going to be, or are they going to investigate the possibility of the areas in Johnson where we can see economic growth? Are they going to invest ideas that Johnson needs to proceed for economic growth too, not just to grab a bunch of money? And where does it go to?
Yeah, grabbing just a bunch of money isn't going to work, right? We need a plan. So to Eric's point, we need somebody who is going to invest their time in finding those opportunities around the town of Johnson and building a plan around them so that we're well positioned to get big money and act on it. And if we don't have somebody who can plan, get the money, and act, we're not going to be well positioned for growth.
Beth, I want to say I like the way you've been handling this meeting.
Thank you. Thanks, Weaver.
And going piece through piece for us. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jeff.
I want to support what Eric and Mark both said. I think they're absolutely spot on. There's two other things I think I would mention. One is they're right. This ARPA money is extraordinary. I had 26 years in municipal government, and I never saw an opportunity where federal funds could be used to meet a federal match for another grant program. And this ARPA money has that capability. It's astonishing to me. I had to read the fine print several times. So if we take $50,000 out to pay for this, this cost, it might seem like a wise thing because it doesn't raise the taxes by $50,000, but it takes $50,000 out of the pot that could otherwise match another grant. And Eric said it right. This money, we could potentially leverage a lot more money with using this money. The other thing I want to say, and I'm not saying that the board would do this, but under the ARPA rules and regulations, the select board is delegated and designated directly to be the group that spends the ARPA money. So I suspect that if your wish is that we spend $50,000 on it for that purpose, that's what we would do. But just the cautionary note is that ultimately is a select board decision.
I'd like to call the question, the amendment.
Is there a second? There's a second. Excuse me. This requires 2/3 majority. All those in favor of calling the question signify by saying aye, excuse me. Those no. Proceed to vote on the amendment first. And that motion was to amend the original motion such that the motion would read, authorize the town of Johnson to appropriate and expend up to $50,000 for the purpose of hiring or contracting with an economic development professional. A vote of aye means you would approve that amendment, and that would become the main motion. If you vote no, the amendment will be defeated, and then we'll proceed to possibly more discussion, but certainly a vote on the main motion. Are we clear on what we're voting on now?
Just to clarify, the amendment is take money out of the ARPA funds.
That's correct. And, okay, sorry. I wrote it in the margin. Let me read this for purposes of clarity. It would amend the original motion to authorize the town of Johnson to appropriate and expend up to $50,000 from the ARPA funds for the purpose of hiring or contracting with an economic development professional. So if you want the original motion to be amended to reflect that language, you would vote aye. Otherwise, you would vote no. All those in favor of amending the main motion signify by saying aye. Those who oppose? No. The amendment is defeated. Is there any further discussion on the original motion?
Probably getting sick of seeing me up here. I guess I'm a little worried that $50,000 isn't going to do the job. Because, you know, it's a real specialized position to know how to do this stuff. You already tried last year with $40,000 and got nowhere, as far as I know. And I'm going to defer to you guys, but, you know, you've obviously made a strategic decision on how much money to put in there. But I just hope that works, because it'd be a shame to go a whole year with nobody and then come back next year and say, you know, we really needed 75. We could have got somebody good and actually made some money. So anyway, I just throw that out. I don't know if you want to make a comment on it or not.
So your motion is to amend to 75. Is that what I heard? You know, that is a gamble we take right now, because we're living in a time where cost of everything is just, it's crazy. I mean, you try to build something, believe me, I know. Building materials, try to hire somebody. You can't even find somebody. But with all of that said, I think 50,000 would get us a long ways, and I think that the next board that sits, they would have options. Well, first of all, some of that position's cost would be covered by whatever grants they're able to pull down and administrate. But to the point of the amendment we just voted down, the select board would have that flexibility of using some ARPA funds to increase that 50,000 if it had the necessity. So I hope that answers your question.
John Gregg, having been involved with raising money for the Studio Center for close to 40 years, I have the same concern that Mike has, that because if you spend $50,000 and get somebody who doesn't get you any money, that's not particularly effective. Is there some way that we could make it more flexible? And how did the select board come up with that figure of 50,000? I mean, did you research the field and find out what people are getting now?
I want to be careful about, yes, it costs a lot hourly to get somebody who's going to do a good job, for sure. It is probably 3 digits hourly to get somebody who's going to do a good job.
What
We
does
wanted
3
to,
digits mean?
meaning $100 an hour or more. Perhaps less, but unlikely, I think. And in terms of, well, I guess we didn't want to be greedy in our 50,000. We know that we have the 40,000 in our current budget, and if we can get somebody in this year and start spending that, it would put us in good position to continue the work in fiscal year 24, which will begin July 1st. So essentially, it probably wouldn't be a full-time person for a full year. You're right. And I think we'd have to assess what that means to us once we get into that. But to Eric's point, if we needed to supplement because we were seeing good traction, hopefully we would be seeing some revenue in our operating budget as well, based on that person. But if there isn't, and we feel like we're in good position, we would have the option to supplement with ARPA if we needed to.
So that approving this amendment now does not limit the select board to spending only $50,000.
Correct. The select board can continue discussions and figure out how to spend if we need to, yes.
So I think, Katie Orist, my question is for Rosemary. Is the village putting this article on their warning as well? They are not. Okay, I wanted to make sure we weren't going to doubly pay. And I agree, 50,000 isn't going to get us jack. So I'm curious why you didn't include this in your overall budget to begin with, instead of a separate article. And yeah, and then I just wanted to make sure it's not going to tie our hands if you can't find someone for 50 grand. So.
Yep. The article from last year wasn't written in a way that we could write this into our budget as a line item. The rewording of the article this year would allow us to if we need to, or if we choose to. So this puts us in a better position for budgeting as regular operating expense. Katie, to answer that question.
Charles Flom. How many hours did Leah work a week, approximately?
I'm hearing 24.
24 hours. So, everybody here, 50. You thought you got $15 million. Do you think Leah was at least responsible for $5 million of that?
I think there's consensus that Leah was responsible for more than $5 million of that.
Wow. So if it just was $5 million as somebody who is in business or any of you, that's 100 to 1. For every $1, we got $100 back. Where do I sign up for that?
The question is, are we advertising for a full-time position or a consultant at an hourly rate? The answer is we've been advertising for either an employee, so a staff, or a firm. So basically we're looking for contracting with an individual or a firm with an option of employment if the opportunity presents itself. So we're trying to be open in the way we're advertising.
Is there a second? Second. Okay, a vote of aye will be saying that we'll move on to vote on the main motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Ayes have it. So what you're voting on is a motion to authorize the town of Johnson to raise, appropriate, and expend up to $50,000 for the purpose of hiring or contracting with an economic development professional. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. Ayes have it. Motion is passed. Moderator is beginning to detect the bouquet of pizza. And we'll declare a very brief recess, like perhaps 3 minutes to find out what the timing of all of this is. So 3 minutes, I'll be back. Welcome back. We are now moving on to Article 7. Shall the voters authorize the town of Johnson to collect property taxes to the town treasurer in 4 equal installments per 32 VSA 4792 as listed below, with delinquent taxes and assessments have been charged against them, an 8% commission. After the 4th installment, 32 VSA 1674, and interest charges of 1% per month, or a fraction thereof, for the first 3 months, and thereafter 1.5% per month, or a fraction thereof, from the due date of such tax. Such interest shall be imposed on a fraction of the month as if it were the entire month, 32 VSA 5136. Payments are due in the hands of the treasurer by 4 p.m. on the below due dates. First installment paid on or before Thursday, August 10, 2023. Second installment to be paid on or before Monday, November 13th, 2023. Third installment to be paid on or before Monday, February 12th, 2024. Fourth installment to be paid on or before Friday, May 10th, 2024. May I have a motion on Article 7? Moved as printed. Is there a second? There is a second. Is there discussion? This is the discussion I anticipated, which is none. Therefore, we'll proceed to vote on the motion. Painful as this is, the motion that voters authorize the town of Johnson to collect property taxes to the town of Johnson. Treasurer, I'll summarize this in 4 installments with a charge of 1% for 3 months and thereafter 1.5%. And any month will be billed as an entire. 4 installments, August 10th, 23, November 13th, 23, February 12th, 24, and May 10th, 24. All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Ayes have it. The motion is carried. Article 8. Shall the voters authorize the town of Johnson to establish a grant match reserve fund for matching grant opportunities in accordance with 24 VSA Section 2804 to be funded annually by a dedicated line item, donations, bequest, and or end-of-year surplus. Is our motion with regard to Article 8? Moved as printed. Is there a second? There is a second. Thank you. Okay, we have...
The purpose of this fund is as specified. It will allow us to put money aside for grant matching over time. This is not something that is intended to be a short-term item. This is a long-term reserve fund that would allow the town to be better positioned in the event that we want to go for a grant and need matching funds to do so. This also, in the budget that we voted on, one of the line items within the budget did talk about putting a little bit of money, can't recall the exact amount off the top of my head, into the fund if we are to establish it.
Charlie Gallanter. I, in principle, agree with it, except for the very last item, where you take whatever the surplus is from this from 1 year and automatically reserve it. So I have an amendment. An amendment is to delete and/or end-of-year surplus, which would require inserting "and" between donations and bequests, period. If you want, so I guess we need a second to that before we can discuss it.
Well, is there a second? Yes, there is a second.
So
let's get this wording straight for my benefit. So, what are you? Just and/or end-of-year surplus.
Yeah, you're going to delete and/or end-of-year surplus and insert and take the and/or and insert it between donations and bequests.
Okay.
We have no way of predicting what end-of-year surpluses are going to be. I think currently we use them to defray or reduce current, they roll over into the next budget kind of thing. To mandate that surpluses go into this fund, I think is not prudent. Also, if we have an end-of-year deficit, do we get to take the money out? Not according to this. So, your turn, Beth.
Thanks, Charlie. This wouldn't mandate surplus funds, so any surplus fund we have to allocate in some way. We would still go through the exercise of allocating surplus funds. We do need, when we establish a reserve fund of any kind, we do need to specify the means in which funds may be added. This allows us to use surplus funds, doesn't dictate that we must use surplus fund.
Diana Osborne. Can we put ARPA money in this reserve fund? Does putting ARPA money in a fund count as like spending it?
Rosemary, do you know, or Brian? She's saying she doesn't believe so. That question is being investigated by other towns and TBD.
Paul Warden. Charlie, I wonder if you would consider an amendment to your amendment and to say a portion of surplus funds, of any surplus funds, to address your concern that it obligates all of the surplus funds.
Can I make a clarifying statement? Just a clarification. The reference to the funding of this reserve fund is, we need to specify where funds can come from. Anytime we talk about obligation of putting funds into a reserve fund, that is not the case. We're not obligating that any source of funding must fund this reserve fund. We're just saying that we have to talk about what the allowances, what the source of money that is allowed, where it can come from to fund it.
I understand that's the intent, but Charlie's concern was that's not what's actually written. So I was just trying to clarify that.
I got you.
So by the logic you just laid out, Beth, if someone makes a donation or a bequest, you're now obligated to put all of that into this fund? That would be the logical follow-up to what you
Rosemary
just
can correct me if I'm wrong, but if a donation comes in and it's earmarked to go into a reserve fund by way of that donation, then we would be obligated to put that money into the fund. Otherwise, this is about the potential sources of funding the reserve fund. But if a specific donation is, in that donation, if you were to write a check and you said for grant matching reserve fund, we would be required to put that donation into the reserve fund. Otherwise, these are potential funding sources.
I'll accept Paul's amendment to Paul's wording, a portion. So it would be, instead of doing that deleting, it would be and/or a portion of the end-of-year surplus. And all is a portion. If you were to take all of the surplus.
Okay, now, just hang on a second. The second was over here. Do you accept that change? Okay.
We okay?
Well, I'm okay that he's agreed, but I'm not okay that I'm clear on what the motion is that we're dealing with now. So let's do that. So we get down to the last line item donations, bequests. What does it go from there?
And/or a portion of the end-of-year surplus.
Okay, so now the main motion.
First, we have to do the amendment.
Oh, wait a minute. No, we're still on the amendment. So the proposed amendment is in the last line to say donations, bequests, and/or portion of any year-end surplus. Is that it? Any further discussion? All those in favor of that amendment signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. Aye. Ayes? Aye. No? No. Ayes stand. Okay. Have a seat. No stand, please.
You say no's, not it?
No's. Yes, no's.
No to the amendment. Those,
You tell them to stand again. I think this is
yeah. Okay. Thank you. So the ayes have it, and that effectively amends it to the language described. Is there further discussion on the main motion? Yes. Yes. And you turn it.
And Eben, I just want you to know I was standing. Okay, my question is, if I'm understanding the motion, is that you have listed this in such a way so that these various forms of money coming into the town can possibly go into this fund. Not that they have to go into this fund, but you are required to list your possible sources. So if somebody were to bequeath the town $50,000 for road infrastructure, it cannot possibly go into this thing. So all this is then is just the possibilities that are available to go into this. If no bequeaths or contributions, donations, or whatever, if none come in, then other than what you guys have in your line item, there won't be anything else in there. So it's nothing that's mandatory, it's only what is possible. Okay.
Any further discussion? Then the motion is yours. Shall the voters authorize the town of Johnson to establish a grant match reserve fund for matching grant opportunities in accordance with 24 VSA 2804 to be funded annually by a dedicated line item, donations, bequests, and/or a portion of year-end surpluses? Portion of the year-end surplus. It was amended the last time around. Were you proposing an amendment?
I am proposing that this article be moved with the amendment to the
We're there. We're there. It's been amended by consent, and I just read it, and I'm asking for those in favor of the motion as amended, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. As amended, it's passed. Article 9, shall the voters authorize the town of Johnson to establish an Arboretum Reserve Fund for the preservation, development, and health of the Johnson Arboretum in accordance with 24 VSA 2804 to be funded annually by donations or bequests dedicated to the Arboretum and or unspent fund budgeted in the town, budgeted to the town of Johnson Tree Board. Is there a motion with regard to that? So moved and seconded. Discussion?
This is similar to the prior, where it would allow for a reserve fund specified for Arboretum use. Same thing about the funding options. Those are the options that would be allowed for funding of this reserve fund.
Allow me to interject something which is totally unrelated to this article. I neglected to mention earlier, there is pie left. So, and there was at some point in time pizza left that was going to be, there are 12 of them available, I think, or 15 of them available at $12 a pop. Yes. So when we get finished, try to find the pie you can find, the pizza, I'm not sure where it is. So, all right. So we've read it, it's moved, seconded. Is there discussion? Appearing to be no. Oh, yes. Okay.
I'd just be curious what this is. I don't know about the Arboretum Fund. I don't know about the Arboretum. I know people do some tree work on the streets. I don't know anything else about it. Maybe somebody could just give a paragraph about what they do.
The explanation is on its way to the microphone.
Yeah, Brian Van Dorn. So the Arboretum is at the old Duba Field, Checkerberry location, which is behind Bill Perkins' house against the Guyon River off of Pearl Clay Hill. It's, I don't know, 4 or 5 acre spot. The select board, and we appreciate that, gave us use of the field a few years ago. We've been using it, that was 2019, so we've been planting there and tending it for 2020, 2021, and 22. We put in 10 trees and shrubs in 2020, 10 in 2021, and 34 last year. So it's quite the growing thing, and it's, of course, everything that's there is growing. There's a good explanation of it in the book for the tree board meeting, and be happy to answer any other questions. But the tree board does a lot of work in general, taking care of the street trees, and then doing the arboretum and any other requests we might get regarding trees. We're doing a lot of work. We have a few volunteers, 5, 6 people right now on the tree board. And again, we definitely appreciate the support, and the Arboretum it's really a big deal. And I know it's not right on Main Street, so people aren't seeing it maybe so much, but it is there, and it's free, and there's also a walking trail along the Guyon River that goes along the backside of it that people use. And so, yeah, I think it's well worth it, and certainly could use more funds in the annual budget. I think right now we're at $2,000 annual budget for the tree board. So this will help a lot. We have received grants. I think this past year, a $5,000 grant. So there is money coming in to where we're able to do this work. But there will definitely be maintenance of this expanded area, and some more plantings coming, so. Hope that covered it.
Thank you.
Charlie Gallanter, I really have a point of information. Does the same logic or argument apply to this, that only a portion of the unspent funds budgeted would be appropriated to this? Or would all of the unspent funds budgeted be sent to this?
Same logic, where it's basically the allowance of, there would still be discussions about what amount actually goes into it.
Sue Lovering, I'm the chair of the tree board. First off, we've never had an unspent fund. And I might have prefaced that by saying that this year's the first year we've ever asked the select board for a cent. The select board gave us 2,000, the village has given us 700. Up till now.
Can you move the mic closer to your mouth?
Closer? Sorry. What'd you miss? Everything? Huh?
Maybe start over.
Okay. This year is the first time we've ever asked the select board for money for the Arboretum. It's a total grassroots effort. It's all volunteer. We have had many donations, and I might say the tree board, there are 6 of us right now, but there are usually 7, has worked like fiends to make this happen. If you recall the Duba field when we started, it was an old ball field with a lot of rusty junk laying all over it. And now it's beautiful and continues to grow that way. So we've written a lot of grants, and as far as unspent funds, it's actually kind of funny because we just never have enough money. And I personally have donated a couple $1,000s, and I know other members of our board have done the same. So the reserve fund would be for, in particular, if somebody wants to make a bequest, we want to be able to say it goes into that fund and nobody else can touch it. It's for the donations only. I don't see any unspent funds ending up there. And frankly, if you haven't been to the Arboretum, I'm sorry about that because it's really wonderful. And there's a board back there with pictures of it, and I hope you'll all visit. Is there any questions I can answer? Okay.
Yeah, I just had one question. So this is specifically unspent funds budgeted to the tree board, which is just a line item. On that previous article, while we said we voted on a portion of the end of year surplus, did not specify whether that was that line item or the general surplus of the full town budget. So this is very much more specific, and it ties back to the unspent funds. Could be like a maximum of $2,000 or $3,000.
Brian, I'm not sure if there was a question in there or not, but the way the board, this might answer part of Charlie's question too, the way the select board looks at transferring money from an unspent line item in the budget would be to, first of all, determine whether or not there is an overall surplus to the town. So if we were in a deficit situation, we would not be automatically, I'm speaking for myself, but as a general rule, if there was a deficit, I cannot imagine voting for transferring any unspent balance from anybody's line item. I would only see that if we were in a surplus situation.
Sorry about this. I meant to say thank you so much, Eric, for all the support you've given the tree board. It's been great. And you may not know that Eric and his mean red machine dig all of our tree holes, which means we don't have to do it by hand, which we've done and is awful.
Something else you can add to your resume. Thing further. Seeing no hands, the motion is yours to authorize the town of Johnson to establish an Arboretum Reserve Fund for the preservation, development, and health of the Johnson Arboretum in accordance with 24 VSA Section 2804, to be funded annually by donations or bequests dedicated to the Arboretum and/or unspent funds budgeted to the town of Johnson Tree Board. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion is carried. Article 10, to transact any other business as may properly be brought before the town meeting.
Thank you. I just want to say a couple of words. I've served with a lot of really good select board members, but I do want to tell you that I'm leaving a board here that I think is pretty top shelf, great members to leave the town with. You got Mark Woodward over there, former legislator. You got Duncan Hastings over here, former town administrator. So they bring a lot of experience and wisdom to the board. Then you got Eben Patch and Beth Foy, who bring youth and new ideas and excitement. Eben serving as the vice chair, Beth is the chair. I can only say, this is a great board to walk out on and leave for the town. You're in really good hands. I would like to thank Rosemary for saying a few words. Those few words are more than she has spoken in the 27 years I've been up here. So when Rosemary speaks, you listen. It means a lot. I did want to just show you that as chair, I served as chair for 23 years. This was the first town report that I brought to the town, presented, and defended. It was dedicated to the municipal building. We had just completed it, just moved into it. So it was dedicated to all of the officers and employees who made this all happen. This town report had 2 pages of budget. This one you just looked at and have approved has 15 pages of budget. This one had a budget number of $550,000. This one had a budget number of $3,340,000. So either I'd done really good work or you should have fired me years ago. What does being a leader in Johnson mean? If you had asked me when I was a kid, what does a leader mean? What do you envision when the word leader is given? And I would have said it would be a guy on a horse with his sword raised high and leading his troops into battle. That was a leader when I was young. Well, a leader in Johnson is more like being in the first car of a roller coaster. And as you're climbing that hill, coming out of the gate, and you're climbing up the long ramp, and you're looking out over on the midway, and everybody is following behind you, and this looks great. This is nice. Well, as you go over the top, if you're in the front car, you just sort of hang there until the rest of the roller coaster comes up over the top. So you're looking straight down, hanging there in midair, way up at some ungodly height, and you're looking straight down at the ground, and you can see right where you're going to die. You're going to hit the ground right there. And that's when I started yelling, "Stop, go back," and I realized that you weren't following me, you were pushing me. And by the way, in the time I've been on the select board, I am now scared to death to get on a roller coaster. I would never get on one again. And so I'm going to be getting off at our next stop here. But it's been a good ride. I can't say it hasn't. But it's taught me a lot about this community. But what I would like to say is all of you out here have always given me a lot of support, and you've been fair. Whenever the board has come to you with a request, whether it's a money item or doing something different, you've always been fair, and you've always usually given us what we wanted, or if we didn't get it, it's because we probably didn't deserve it, and it wasn't the right thing to do. And I appreciate you for all of that support over these last 27 years. Thank you.
Is there any other business?
Hello, Jackie Stanton. Good to be with everybody today. I would like to propose a non-binding resolution regarding the recent changes at NVU Johnson and the other colleges in the Vermont State University system. So I have a resolution. Shall I just read it? Okay, here it comes. If I can read my own handwriting.
Well, I'm going to have to read it too, so you better make it good.
We, the citizens and voters of Johnson, Vermont, oppose the recently announced changes to the Vermont State University libraries and athletic offerings, which are 1, removing the majority of all physical collections from the libraries, eliminating library staff positions, creating an all-digital library, and 2, removing varsity sports from the Randolph campus and dissolving the Johnson campus's affiliation with the NCAA. We support and affirm the importance and necessity of these resources for all students and for the betterment of the greater Vermont community.
Don't run away. Come. And now the big challenge. Oh, let's just. Nothing. Okay, well, let's just. Okay. So yes, thank you. So the motion is, we the citizens and voters of Johnson, Vermont oppose the recently announced changes to athletic offerings, which are, no wait, I'm missing some. Okay, we the citizens and voters of Johnson, Vermont oppose the recently announced changes to the Vermont State University libraries and athletic offerings, which are removing the majority of all physical collections, elimination of library staff from the libraries, and creating an all-digital library, removing varsity sports from the Randolph campus, dissolving the Johnson campus's affiliation with the NCAA. We support and affirm the importance and necessity of these resources for all students and the betterment of the greater Vermont community. Got it? Is there a second?
Second.
I think there was a second. Thank you.
So I think this is a point of order. I think in your opening remarks you said we couldn't have a resolution that was negative, we had to have a resolution that was positive. This resolution is we oppose and doesn't say what we favor. Just point of information.
Since it does not call upon us to do anything other than to state a position as opposed to perform an act, the chair will rule that it is in order in its present form. Again, if it were on the part of the main agenda, I probably would rule differently. Yes. Any further? Yes.
Bill Moore, class of '88. I won't ask Jackie what class, because, you know, you don't ask women to say things like that. Pretty close. So I'm glad you brought this up. Appreciate the sentiment. And I think, you know, as long as non-binding resolutions remain non-binding and non-binding in their nature, and in addition to being non-binding on those we send them to, I will vote in favor of this in a non-binding sentiment. Having said that, we ought to watch our backs and consider what we will do if they vacate, in whole or in part, because I would expect it in the next decade. And I understand they're looking for a children's detention facility as well as a women's prison, so a couple ideas on
that. Any further comment?
My name's Offie Wortham, former teacher, professor up at the college. I'm totally in favor of the resolution. I don't know, why it would be non-binding? Or what, you know?
In order for this meeting to do anything that involves money or resources of the community, it has to be on the main menu of this meeting. Under other business, nothing that is done under other business is binding.
Oh, okay.
If you want to have something that is binding, you get out a petition or you get the select board to put it on the main warning.
Okay, got it.
Got it? Any further discussion of this? Seeing none, I shall struggle through this again. We, the citizens and voters of Johnson, Vermont, oppose the recently announced changes to the Vermont State University libraries and athletic offerings, which are removing the majority of all physical collections from the libraries, eliminating library positions and staff positions, creating an all-digital library, and removing varsity sports from the Randolph campus and dissolving the Johnson campus's affiliation with the NCAA. We support and affirm the importance and necessity of these resources for all students and for the betterment of the greater Vermont community. All in favor of that resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Resolution is adopted. Any other business?
Jen Burton, I apologize for this late, whatever, but I don't know if this can be decided today, but I would like to suggest that the town offices open 2 hours late on the days after town meeting days and other voting days where the votes go into the evening. Is that anything that can be decided today?
That's Rosemary.
Yep, I would like the town offices to open with a 2-hour delay after town meeting day, so the day after town meeting day and the day after any other voting happens in the evening. I think the people in the offices have these really long days. They prepare for long days ahead of these days. They work especially late on these days, and then they get up and open the town offices at 7:30. And I think that a 2-hour delay seems like a reasonable thing for the people of Johnson and the people who work in the office. Again, I don't know if that's something that can be decided today, but if we can consider it today or moving forward.
Well, we can proceed one of two ways. You can be satisfied with having made your point to the folks who are going to make that decision, or you can make it in the form of a resolution, which we can then possibly debate and vote on. What is your preference?
A resolution.
Okay, then resolution it shall be.
So, do I need to resolve something?
Well, you've kind of tossed the resolution into my court.
Okay.
And I'm going to attempt,
Thank you.
to catch the essence of this, and if I
I
fail,
appreciate that.
I'm sure you'll straighten me out.
I
So-
will.
So don't go anywhere.
I won't.
Okay. Resolve that following town meeting and other general election days, that the town clerk's office open. What do you normally open? 7:30. Open at 9:30 rather than 7:30.
Sounds good.
Does that cap, get it?
Yep.
There is a second. Thank you. Is there a discussion? Bearing in mind that this is a non-binding resolution.
Molly Zapp. I like this idea a lot. I guess I just want to make sure that that's what the staff there actually want. Maybe they want the bustle, or they feel this pressure to get things going in the morning. Maybe there's overtime that's being paid that people count on. I just want to make sure that the people who are most directly affected actually for sure want this.
So the town clerk is responsible for setting town office hours. We'll leave that with Rosemary. We do, however, have folks who report to the town, and we can certainly have discussions, and your support of all people involved in the clerk's office and the town is very much appreciated.
Any further discussion? question is yours. Resolve that on town meeting and general election days that the town clerk's office open 2 hours after its normal starting time at 9:30 rather than 7:30. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Resolution is adopted and is, everyone has said here over and over, non-binding. Sure.
Diana Osborne. I would like to make a motion that the Town Select Board do a thorough evaluation of public safety to involve analysis of emergency medical services, police, and fire.
Rescue, fire.
EMS, police, / sheriff, and fire. It's public safety or public service is a full 25% of our budget. And I feel like we give a lot of analysis of much, much smaller expenditures. You know, we talk a lot about, you know, $1,000 here, $2,000 there, and this is 25% of our budget goes to public safety. And I think it needs a more thorough investigation, and we need to look at how we're spending that money, how we could better spend the money, what our obligation is to spend that money, and needs to be looked at.
Is there a second? There's a second. Discussion?
Shane Spence. I'd like to potentially offer a friendly amendment, if Diana would accept, to add extreme weather events, extreme weather preparedness as something that we consider in this.
I don't think that's part of our expenditures at this point. I was just looking at the things that we currently spend for public safety.
Okay. All right, then I will retract.
Seeing nothing further.
Could we hear from a select board member of any type about that concept, whether they're already doing any of that?
It's true that the emergency spending is about 25% of our regular operating budget and the general operating budget. There have been a number of folks. There was a small committee that worked on sheriff, working through many topics around sheriff's, the sheriff patrol very specifically. We have a multi-town agreement on sheriff contract, which basically means that Johnson contracts directly with the sheriff's department, as does Wolcott and Hyde Park. And we essentially split cost of patrol budget for those services. We also have separate contracts on dispatch and through the sheriff's department, and EMS through, I'm going to not say their name correctly, but it's the Northern NEMS, just say NEMS, okay, NEMS. And then obviously fire is through the fire department through the village. In terms of a full audit, I can't speak for what the select board would vote to do or not. I would just caution, we should be very careful about all things we spend money on all of the time. And I share your, I don't know if it's concern. I think you have concern. I think there's concern. I can read into what you said, Diana. That it is a lot of money that we spend. I personally have spent a lot of time digging into how that breaks down. I think it's up to the board to discuss whether or not we would want to put full audit effort into this and weigh that against other priorities that are also on our plate. So I don't want to say that I can speak very specifically about this because I can't, but I hear your concern.
Sir, further discussion? Seeing none, I will attempt to repeat this. Resolved that the Select Board evaluate from a public safety standpoint and do an analysis of EMS, police, sheriff, and fire services currently being paid for by the town. Is that it? Okay, and I had a second. It's been discussed. All in favor of that resolution signify by saying aye. Opposed, no.
No.
The ayes stand. Be seated. Will the nays stand? Thank you very much. The ayes have it. Resolution is adopted. Anything further under other business?
Hi, I'm Lauren Marsan. I just had a question about this. I guess it's like the structure of the town meeting and accessibility, because I think this has been really nice and I love being able to be here, but I know we have 3,000 residents and they're clearly not all here and able to vote on things that might concern them. And I was wondering if the board has discussed other options for how to encourage more voter participation. Because I know that especially in terms of accessibility for disability, immunocompromised people, people who have to work, there are possibly quite a lot of people who would like to participate and can't. So I guess that's my question is, has that been discussed? How can we potentially investigate that further?
Over the number of years, that's been discussed many times, and the league even did a study. Some towns had moved their town meeting to the evening or to a Saturday to try to see if they could get more participation. And in towns that did move from the traditional day of Tuesday, the first Tuesday in March, the participation actually went down. And so, okay, that maybe doesn't work. Australian ballot, you get more participation, but you don't have this opportunity to explain a particular article. It's a simple, Australian ballot, it's a simple yay or nay, vote up or down. With the town meeting format, of course, you have the opportunity to even amend it, change it in some fashion. So there are pluses and minuses to each. During COVID, last couple of years, we mailed out Australian ballots to every resident in the town. And even with a return address stamped envelope, well, we got about 40% back, I believe, of the registered voters. Not even 40%. So I'm not sure if we have to go around to everybody's home and vote for them or what, but it's a struggle.
I understand that for sure, and this is an amazing opportunity to see your neighbors and meet them and all those sorts of things, but also that 40% is significantly higher than the number of people here right now, correct?
Yes, it is.
So I guess, I don't know, is there anything to move forward with that? Do I have to make a resolution to investigate that on how to get better voter participation, or what? It's just no? No, this is how we do it? Because
if you have some suggestion, this would be the format.
Okay, then I guess my suggestion is maybe make a resolution for the select board to explore how to increase voter participation, potentially via asynchronous select board or town meeting days or something like that. I guess that's not a real resolution. Someone else would have to write it. But yeah, maybe just for the select board to explore ways to increase voter participation in ways that might mirror the increase of the COVID era participation. Thank you.
I'm just curious before you leave. I'm curious, are there specific portions of the things we vote on that are of particular interest to you? Or is it just
yes,
a
that's where
forum
I
as a whole?
came. In general, I just like to participate as a voter in local politics, as many people do, and not everyone has the privilege to be able to show up at 9 a.m. I know my spouse had to leave to work. My other friend who was here had to leave for work, wasn't able to vote on some things. So I think it's just more that concern.
Okay, it's the forum itself as opposed to the items that we're voting on.
I think so, yeah. And I definitely by no means want to make town meeting day not happen. I just am trying to think of ways that we could get more people involved. Obviously, I mean, you can see the age gap that's here. There's probably quite a large class gap that's here, and that means that the voices that are heard in voting are a skewed population of what's actually potentially the interests of the rest of the town residents. Thanks.
Excuse me, Alfie Wortham. I'd just like to suggest there are cities and towns and countries where they have 95% participation in voting. Okay? Even in this country, there are some cities and towns that have 80, 90% of the people involved. I would suggest that somebody hire, volunteer, or whatever, do some research, which can be done on Google for free in a few hours, to find out how have some towns and communities increased the participation of the people? What have they done besides paying them? I mean, how do you get people interested enough to really vote? And it has happened, people have done it. How have they done it?
I'm not an analyst.
Triple the budget.
That would do it. Dave said triple the budget. That'll bring people out. That's mean. I've always thought that if we had an article that we wanted to convert the cold storage building into a spaceship garage, that might bring people out. It's really ironic that the discussion we're having today here and a resolution to try to get more participation, any of these kind of resolutions for the college, we wouldn't be able to have those things if you did have Australian ballot. So there's pluses and minuses either way that you go. How to get more participation? I mean, that's the $100,000 question. Everybody tries to figure that out. Anybody running for an office is trying to figure out how to get people who support me out and actually vote. Even in general elections, what is it, 60, 70% of the voters actually vote in Johnson? 50% of the voters in Johnson on a presidential election will actually get out and vote. It's a sad commentary of how things are in this town, but in the state and in the country. Boy, if anybody's got any great ideas on how to get people out, short of building a spaceship garage, we're all ears.
Yeah, okay, sounds good. I just want to make a comment about town meeting day, and there are, if we wanted to shift away from town meeting day, there are ways to do that, and anyone could petition to do so. I personally like town meeting day a lot. I think it's great to see everybody who is able to come out. And if there are ways in which we can support more people coming out, I'm pretty confident our select board would be very open to hearing those ways. I just want to make the comment that town meeting day isn't a select board meeting, it's a meeting of the people. So it is not about the people sitting at this table. We're just presenting artifacts. So I just want to, put that out there for consideration as you think about this more. David, I don't know if you have anything you want to add?
Interesting. Do we have a total on how many people were checked off? 104? Okay. If, that actually is pretty good. But there's a lunch and melt that we get. If everyone in this room now, next year when town meeting day came up, make it a point to bring 2 friends or neighbors with them. May take handcuffs or bear spray or something, but bring your friends with you. I'll get to you in just a second. Yes.
Marilyn Emery. I suggest that, and Eben, stop laughing. And I suggest that you ask somebody out for lunch. Bring them to the town meeting too. Free lunch for them.
Actually, there's only one way you could improve on that, and that's put a sign out front that says free beer.
Jasmine Uris. I just wanted to take the opportunity to say, while I do hear all of your points about only a certain group being represented today, I want to say that I am so thankful for the childcare that was provided today, because I wouldn't have been able to be here for this long with my kids. So I'm really thankful for that. And I'm also just thinking back to pre-COVID times. I think Roland and Gary came and played music during potluck lunch. I mean, that just made it even more Johnson, and it made it more of a party. Like, I loved that. And I think I remember like flowers being on the tables. I don't know. I'm a very aesthetic person, but I just think that like the more we hype it up, the more we make it a town celebration and a big, to do beyond just the meeting itself, but making it a welcoming space for parents and the residents here. I just think the more we put attention towards that, the better. The bigger turnout. Thank you.
Shane Spence. And I don't really have any solutions for you guys either. This is a really complicated thing. I too really love town meeting day. Having everybody here to go back and forth on the articles, I think, is a very special thing that we would very much miss if we didn't have it. But it is a serious equity concern of who is able to show up and who is not able to show up. I myself had to take time off work in order to come here today, which is not something that everyone is privileged to be able to do. And my wife is not able to be here today because she is working. So that's 1/2 of our household that is unrepresented in these proceedings. And I can only imagine how many households don't even have that half. So it is a real equity concern, and it's something that we do have to think about going forward. Like I said, I don't really have anything in the way of solutions, because getting rid of this would not be worth it in my mind. But things like the daycare, things like, that bring people in for more than just the fun of going back and forth on motions all day, I think are more than worth it. So thank you.
All right, Eric. Bill Moore again. So back when Jackie and I were in college, I did a lot of work with a professor named Frank Bryan, who studied literally hundreds and hundreds of town meetings over the course of a decade. And all the Pearson's coefficients and variables and blah-da-da-da-da. And everything that came out of it was pretty basic. The more meat on the ballot, the more meat here in this room, the more people will show up. And he used to make a joke. He said, best thing you do for town meeting is to make your school into a private school run by the town without any state interference, elect people to the legislature who won't continue to impose mandates on the towns, and run your school with your own money, and people will show up because they'll have skin in the game. But I will tell you this, everybody who showed up today, 100% of them wanted to be here. So.
Well, unfortunately, Board, you are working against people showing up because you're doing too good a job. If you did a really crummy job, we'd all be here yelling and throwing stuff at you, and there'd be a big crowd here. But the other more positive idea, because I hope you continue to do a good job, I'm sure you will, would be to potentially we should petition our legislature and declare town meeting day a state holiday with pay, and you get extra pay if you go to town meeting.
Hi, my name is Adrian Stevenson. I second what he said. I'm just kidding. I just moved here recently, a year ago, so like in a week or so it'll be a year ago. And this is my first town meeting, and I really like it, and it's really awesome to be here with everyone. And I just wanted to say that I just joined the Planning Commission recently, and would love to talk to anyone that has any suggestions for what we should include in the town plan. And also I wanted to ask a question. I care about the environment, I care about the people, I care about everyone here, even though I'm new. And I was just been watching like the train derailment in Ohio and been observing that a little bit, and I'm just curious if we have any like protocols in place if something were to happen like that here, and like if not, that maybe we should be looking into something like that as preventative measures to happen.
Thank you.
Yeah, I know. Geez, you're going to put me right on the spot, right at the end of everything for me. For a number of years, I've been what they call in this town, every town has one, an emergency management director, and basically assembles a team. And we have identified all of the known hazards within the town. We do try to identify what might be going through the town. There is, of course, the fire department has certain protocols on if it was a spill, you know, like a train, although our train hasn't run for a couple of years, I don't think we've got to worry about that derailment. But if a truck overturned that was carrying some hazardous material, there are some protocols that they would have. We're not in this alone. If anything did happen, a simple phone call, I can get anybody from Vermont Emergency Management to respond with whatever our needs are. I will say the most common event that we have here in Johnson is flooding, and we're pretty comfortable with how to react to that because we've done it so many times. But there always could be something out of the blue that hits us, but we do have things in place on who would come and who would respond and what help we need we can get.
Okay. Thank you.
Just as a casual aside, the first town meeting I attended back in the 1970s was in the town gym, and you had to fight to get a seat there. There were so many people. And the main event were the election of officers, because that was done from the floor. And the first one we went after was a select board seat. There were 2 open on a 3-member board. There were 14 nominations. And the moderator, for several hours, refused to cut anybody off the bottom end of that list. But after about 2.5 hours of voting in which nobody got a majority, we finally got it down to 2 people. And then it was lunch. So we didn't really elect anybody before lunch. So we came back after lunch thinking, aha, you know, we're going to get somebody. And with all those people there, the first ballot was a tie vote. And the moderator said, well, let's do that again. And not surprisingly, the second one was a tie vote. We are now somewhere around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We finally did a third ballot, and I think somebody may have been kidnapped in the interim because one of the candidates won by one vote. Now, that would seem to kind of move you along, because if there were two candidates for two seats and you just elected one, then it's logical that the guy who got one less vote would fill the other seat. Well, his feelings were hurt that he'd lost, so he refused to accept the second seat. So we had to have another 6 or 7 nominees, and that town meeting went until after dinner. But they had a really good turnout. Anything else, folks? Yep.
So Eric, I think you had a really good idea about approaching our legislators, because I think under current Vermont law, you are able to attend town meeting. An employer can't restrict you from attending town meeting, but they don't have to pay you for it. So if it were made a state holiday, that would help. But I'm not convinced that it would have a radical increase in membership or attendance. I did want to. I've got to get my glasses. All right, I got them in my pocket. I did want to move a resolution, and that would be that this assembly acknowledges Eric Osgood's 27 years of service to the community of Johnson and extends their sincere appreciation for his service.
Second.
Can you read the writing?
I'll tell you in a minute. Is there any discussion of that motion? There was a second, correct?
There was a second.
Okay. Seeing no discussion, the resolution would read, resolved that this assembly acknowledge Eric Osgood's 27-year service to the community of Johnson and extend their sincere appreciation for his service. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. I was thinking of doing that, actually. Anything else? The A word, ring a bell? Is there a second? It's not amendable, it's not debatable. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. See you next year. Bring your neighbor.